session. In terms of committee attendees, I don't see Linda McAllister. Linda, did you make it in? Okay. And I don't see Murat either. Gina, is there a way we can send Linda again the link and hopefully it works?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, while she is calling in and folks continue to join, I think we can move forward here. This brings us to item 3 on the agenda. It's all you, Gina.
Okay. I recommend that minutes relating to the privacy of students and their records of the home instruction request remain sealed.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a second on that one?
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Linda Lyle, seconded by Craig to close and seal executive session minutes. Any discussion on that from the committee? Nope. Those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any committee members opposed? Any committee members abstaining or recusing? Then I'm counting it as unanimous. Thank you. This brings us to the disclosure of the executive session votes.
Okay, Chair, we had, first of all, it's wonderful to see 80 people visiting us tonight, including us. We had 4 votes in executive session. Vote was concerning home instruction requests. It was 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions, 0 recusals. In favor, Abbott, Callahan, Chambers, Day, Johnson, Luzon, Lyall, Macaruso, and Stahl. Second vote was home instruction requests. Concerning home instruction requests, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions, 0 recusals. In favor, Abbott, Callahan, Chambers, Day, Johnson, Luzon, Lyall, Macaruso, and Stahl. The third vote was concerning executive session minutes of July 20 transportation contract. 7 in favor, 0 opposed, 2 abstentions, 0 recusals. In favor, Abbott, Callahan, Chambers, Johnson, Luzon, Lyall, Macaruso, abstaining, Day, and Stahl. The fourth vote was to return to regular session to see all these wonderful people. 10 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions, 0 recusals. In favor, Abbott, Callahan, Chambers, Day, Johnson, Luzon, Lyall, Macaruso, McAllister, and Stahl.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, we have item number 5, which is recognition. Gina, the floor is yours.
I would like everyone to join me in congratulating the following students. The high school students Isabel Sullivan Ratcliffe, Cordelia Halverson, Emily Stevens, Abby DiTomaso, and Autumn Liguori Bills for their extraordinary job they did in organizing and overseeing the Black Lives Matter peaceful protest on Monday, June 8th at the Richmond Town Hall, and they will all receive their very coveted Chara-Ho pin in this recognition. I would also like to recognize the Technology Department, Sean Cole, Eric O'Brien, Dorothy Fitzgerald, Laurie Bouchard, Donald Wachowski, Tony Giarusso, Kyle Rumerich, Thomas Arbij for the July Employees of the Month for their outstanding job during all their work for virtual learning.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so this brings us up to public forum. There is an awful lot of public here tonight, which is outstanding. If you would all please, at the bottom of your screen, there is a participants icon. If you click on that, there will be a box on the right-hand side that pops up, and that lists all the participants. At the bottom of that box, there's a little hand icon. It basically means just raise your hand. If you click on it, like Calvin's iPad just did, it will pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to call you and in order for you to participate in the dialogue. So with that out of the way, this is public forum. It's open to anybody in the public who would like to discuss something that is not on the agenda tonight. So I do see a hand up, Calvin's iPad.
Hi, Dr. Callahan. Just to clarify, this is Nell Carpenter. I'm sorry, I'm on my husband's iPad. So,
I know.
hi. I just left a council meeting and didn't expect actually to be able to participate in this meeting, but ours went quite well. So I'm just going to read the email I sent to you. I don't know if you were able to read that before your meeting, but I'll just read that if I may.
Actually, no. No. If you don't
Yes.
mind, we are we have a full section tonight that talks about returning to school reopening, and that I did see your letter, and it's perfectly in line with that discussion. So if possible, if you could hold until then, I think that would be ideal.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Anyone else who would like to share? Okay. So for committee members as well, with 87 people on it, it's very difficult for me to capture everything. So in terms of voting, if I will go through, you just have to audibilize if you have either an abstention or an opposition or a recusal. Okay, so we'll go slow through that process. But just so you know, I won't be able to see hands so much as that. Okay, with public forum closed, this moves us to business. Gina?
Per the memo you received dated July 2nd, 2020 from Ned Draper, RIDE has stated that it will reduce the state education aid payment to our Charahoe member towns by $315,603 for their final FY20 June payment. It is our understanding from RIDE that this funding will be restored in FY21 via method not yet determined and will likely use federal funds paid directly to Charahoe to make up the difference. I am recommending your vote that if the district receives this payment from RIDE, that Charahoe will pay the towns this balance due to the fact that towns paid Charahoe in full for the FY20 state aid allocations. The anticipated amounts to be returned are Charlestown, $42,900, Hopkinton, $143,734, and Richmond, $129,969. Again, this is dependent upon Charahoe receiving these funds from this state.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second to return state aid should the funds be received from the state. This is open for discussion. Any committee members or public have a discussion point on this? I'm getting that long pause there. Okay. The phone number ending in 0018, is that you, Barbara?
Hello, this is Barbara Capalbo from Hopkinton. I would simply like to ask if Gina, the superintendent, could please, when she's giving us numbers like this, speak a little more slowly. It's hard to write that fast because it certainly is interesting to all of us on council. So I would just appreciate a little slower speech so we have enough time to actually write notes to ourselves and to our town. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks, Barbara.
All the documents are also on the website for anyone to review as well, but I will make sure I do that.
Thank you. If you are not speaking, please mute your phone. Thanks. Any further discussion on this topic? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to the committee. We have a motion and a second on the floor to return state aid should it come through. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Is there any? Any opposed? Any recusals or abstentions? Okay, I'm counting it as unanimous. Thank you. Letter B.
I recommend the vote to commit retroactively to June 30th, 2020, the funds as noted in the memo from Mr. Draper dated July 14th, 2020, and that memo reviews the savings we had from the spring to move that funding for our COVID expenses that we will need for reopening.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Commitment of fiscal year 20 funds. This is open for discussion. So I do see 3 hands up. Nell, I don't know if you have something on that or if you just didn't clear the raised hand icon. Barbara as well, and then Kristen Haxton.
Sorry, I didn't clear. Sorry, this is Barbara. I did not unclear the
Okay.
star 9.
Thank you.
Ryan,
Nor did I. Sorry, Ryan. I did not clear either.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nell. Appreciate it.
sorry, Ryan, I had a late question about the finances that you just approved, so I'm all set. I didn't clear my hand. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Any other discussion on this topic? In that case, move this to vote. All those in favor of commitment of the fiscal year 20 funds? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any recusals? Okay, I'm counting that as unanimous also. Thank you so much. This brings us to letter C.
I recommend the approval of the revised 2020-2021 school calendar, which adheres to the state mandated school calendar for next year. Just to clarify, it also talks about the high school graduation, but that actually is being moved to June. It does say tentative. It's being moved to June 5th due to a coordination with the Ryan Center, and that will be early afternoon.
So moved.
Thank you. So I have a motion by Craig and second by Linda Lyle to approve the 2020-2021 school calendar revision. This is open for discussion. Going once, twice. Okay, I am closing discussion, moving this to the committee for vote. All those in favor of approving the school calendar?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Recusals? No, I'm counting that as unanimous as well. Thank you. This brings us to letter D.
This item was requested by a Hopkinton resident during public forum at the last meeting. Voters in each of the 3 towns approved the FY21 budget as presented. Therefore, the district has implemented this budget effective July 1st, 2020.
Perfect. Thank you, Gina. So this question did come up, and it was I forget the gentleman who brought it up, but it was around the adopted budget by the committee that went to the 3 towns. All 3 towns have approved it. The mechanism of which the approval took place is not ideal, but we are recognizing the approval from all 3 towns. So we're moving forward with our adopted budget as recommended by the school committee. Did anyone have questions on the fiscal year 21 budget? Donna Chambers.
Ryan, it probably goes without saying, but John has, and it's okay legally to go forward with this, correct?
Correct.
It won't come back to haunt us at some point. By that, I mean, I hope this is not going to set a precedence and we break the Charahoe Act by doing this kind
Yeah.
of thing. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good comment. So it didn't work out in terms of the compliance to the Charahoe Act from all three towns. However, each town did carry a vote. There was no disputing in terms of the vote. And since between the three towns, all votes ended up being in favor of adopting the school budget, there really is no reconciliation that would need to take place at this point. All towns have put it into their municipal budgets and have adopted it mechanistically. That is, it's not the ideal way to go about it, but next year we'll hope to avoid it and be in a better position. Donna?
Follow up to that, Ryan?
Yep.
Could you, on behalf of the school committee, send out a letter to all three towns and suggest that this not happen again, that it was unusual circumstances and we must be in compliance of the Charahoe Act? So I'm recommending a letter go out.
Okay, let's take that offline then.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Bill Day.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, for some reason my school computer doesn't want to respond, so I'm on my old-fashioned one and I can't visualize, or you can't visualize me. But I just want to clarify one thing: we did not break the Charahoe Act. We abided by the Charahoe Act. One of the other towns chose to do something different, so I don't like the idea that we broke the Charahoe Act. I think that needs to be clarified for everyone on board of this meeting, that we did what we were bound to do by the Charahoe Act. It wasn't us that didn't follow the Charahoe Act.
That's correct, Bill. The school committee at all times complied with the Charahoe Act, as did Richmond and Charleston.
I agree, Bill.
All right. Yes, sir. Mr. Luzon?
I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we are over 100 participants. I think that is fantastic.
Thanks, Greg. All right, folks. Next up, we have letter E.
The implementation of an equity and inclusion task force. This item is on the agenda at the request of Lisa Macaluso.
Thank you, Gina. Lisa, the floor is yours.
So to begin, I'll start with a motion so that we can move to discussion. I make a motion for the school committee to form an anti-racist task force to examine the policies, practices, and curriculum of the Charahoe School District from the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Lisa, a second by Catherine. This is now open for discussion. Lisa, the floor is yours.
So let me open this discussion with a land acknowledgement adapted from John King and Dave Robinson. I acknowledge that the land on which we educate our children is the traditional land of the Narragansett people, and that I respect their spiritual relationship with this land. I acknowledge that the Narragansett people, as the traditional custodians of this land, and that their traditional cultural beliefs and practices are still important to the living Narragansett people today. I also pay respect to the cultural authority of the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead and other Native peoples who are here with us today, either in person or remotely. And I'll include that citation in the chat at the end of this discussion. So why this? Why us and why now? This, in order to be an anti-racist educational system, we must address both the overt and institutionalized racism in Charahoe. No one person can do this work. But what we can do is establish a task force to review our policies, our practices, and our curriculum through the lens of diversity and equity, inclusion, and justice, and then advise the school committee of actions to be taken. Why us? Because we're elected to oversee the Char House school system. We pledge to uphold justice for all before every meeting, and we pride ourselves in educating all the kids all of the time. And our high school students led the way when they successfully organized a peaceful Black Lives Matter protest at the Richmond Town Hall. And why now? Because we need to acknowledge and address that a global pandemic is not the only crisis our students are facing. Should this motion pass, I will provide the chair with a comprehensive and beautiful list of community leaders who have felt called to serve on this task force and stand ready to support our system. Thank you, and I welcome discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. This is open for discussion. I see Bill Day, Donna Chambers, and then Catherine Giusti in terms of order, and then David Stahl. So Bill, you're up.
I forgot to put my hand down right now, Chairman. I apologize.
No problem, Bill. That brings us to Donna Chambers.
Hi. Okay, so I didn't hear all of what Lisa said at the beginning, but I would suggest that we not call it an anti-racist task force, but an anti-prejudice or bias, or a word that is more inclusive than just racism. It certainly includes racism, but it needs to be an anti-prejudice task force study.
Thank you, Donna. Catherine.
Thank you. I think it's time that this has happened. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing this to the forefront. It's not going to be easy. And I think if we all can recognize that up front, that these are going to be really difficult, uncomfortable conversations for most of us. We are in a predominantly white community. Rhode Island in our area is predominantly white, though that is changing. And I think we have a long way to go. And I think formed in this way, this is the exact way to do it. Our children are clamoring for it. Our children are ready for it. They need the leadership from the leaders of our community. So to say I'm looking forward to it maybe is a little juvenile, but I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the hard work. Ready to hear what comes out of it. And I think we all, as leaders who are predominantly white, need to recognize that we aren't necessarily the ones who are going to be leading the charge on this. We've got a lot of listening to do and a lot of learning to do. And I think it's time to just take a step and listen. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. So folks, there's a lot of hands up. So I write it down in order so I don't miss anybody. But I have David Stahl, Clay, and then I have Silver Moon LaRose. I'll do Bill, Barbara, Linda Lyle, Nija Hill, and Donna Chambers again. So once you have spoken, please clear your hand from the participants list so that I can continue to facilitate this. Mr. Stahl, the floor is yours. I can't hear you, David. Still can't hear you, David. Okay, I'm gonna circle back to you. Thank you. I'll come back to you. Clay?
Hi, I think our job as elected officials is to meet the moment, and this is certainly the moment to talk about this. I think it's especially important because we're an educational institution, which is where a lot of this stuff gets resolved. My main point in saying this is that it's very important, I think, for our efforts to be constructive, not destructive. The model that I like is Nelson Mandela's Truth and Reconciliation Committee. The history there, it could have gone a very, very different way, but there was a lot of forgiveness. As Catherine said, there was a lot of listening, and I think hopefully a lot of understanding between a lot of people. The quote that I'd like to give today is actually from a business person. It's from Peter Drucker, and he said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. So I think a lot of our challenge is to find new logic to deal with the moment that we're in. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Clay. Mr. Stahl, did you solve your mic?
You tell me, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I got this cool, fancy new headset, and we're still figuring it out. So I had an opportunity to speak with Lisa about this to understand better what she was trying to do, and look forward to participating with the group. And I encouraged her to consider some of our community clergy to be a part of that, because I think that that's a social and cultural institution here from all the faith groups represented, that would be a helpful ally in this conversation. But I'm looking forward to it, and I think our goal needs to be, and my goal in this and in our community, is to help every generation get a little better at this than the previous generation. We can look back and we can see how we've done badly in the past, and I think the goal is for us to get better with every generation. And so I think starting with teaching our kids and having these conversations in the schools is a great place for us to work on getting a little better in this generation and getting a little better in the next generation, and so on. So I'm really excited about it. I agree with Catherine that a lot of these conversations, once we really get into them, can be difficult or challenging. But I think they're very important conversations. I think they're very good conversations. And we've got some things to understand. And there's a lot of things that I don't know yet. And that's why we have to have these conversations, so that we can understand what we don't know and work toward it. So I thank you, Lisa. I do like Donna's suggestion of a bit of a broader term, and I like the one that Lisa put in the comments, so that we make sure we're including every kind of bias and that sort of thing. So I like the idea of it being a little bit of a broader term going forward. So when the next issues are coming up, the same group of people can look at them with the same lens. So if the next issue is a gender issue or a religious issue or whatever it is, that the same group of people can approach it with the same mindset of equity and justice and fairness. And so I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a good thing.
Thanks, Dave. Next up, we have Silvermoon LaRose.
Osquequasin, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
So I just wanted to first speak to terminology. I don't think we should be afraid of words like racism. Racism speaks to systems that are in place that create problems. So we shouldn't shy away from that word. It's something that we should embrace. But regardless of the name of the group, it's the idea of what it's meant to do. And I'm speaking from a person who has been involved in this work with Charahoe for quite a number of years. This is not the first time something like this has been proposed. Many times in the past we have had, especially when you're dealing with issues of tribal students, we've had task force that have come to high school to deal with issues with the students, and it always seems to start and then stop. Because we kind of form these little committees, but they're not given any real support or any real power to create actual active and meaningful change. So in doing something like this, I think there also needs to be conversations about what the goals are, how it's going to be incorporated into the school committee, into actual actionable plans that are going to be put into place. One of the things when I was reading a newspaper article kind of about this idea is there was talk about it's not having to cost anybody anything. But no, this is something that should cost. These are changes that do come with money. When we need to change curriculums, when we need to change systems, they need to be supported financially. So when you start putting money behind something, you start taking it seriously. So I think that also needs to be considered when we're having these conversations. I definitely would like to see something in this manner go forward, but I definitely want it to be taken more seriously than just another talking committee. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. One comment on mechanistically to that point is that the task force is the starting point. it helps to identify the problem. It helps to frame that problem. From there, that task force is obligated to report back to the school committee, at which point the school committee will, if they choose to vote in favor of it, would move forward with empowering a subcommittee. That subcommittee would then tackle the actions or actionable items that came out of the task force, and upon finding solutions with the problems identified, present that to the full committee for formal adoption. Anyways, thank you. So in order, I have, and George, I did get your hand. Thank you, sir. So I've got Bill Day, Barbara, Linda Lyle, Mijah Hill, Donna Chambers, Craig, and Donis Spears, and George. So Bill Day, you're up.
Yes, I want to echo Donna's thought that racism is in a task force that is going to be inclusive of all of the people that may been offended by the way some of the people in the state of Rhode Island and the country, and Charahoe in particular, are treated. I don't think that's a good way to start off. We still have a lot of people in this area that are negative towards minorities, and I think that if we want to be positive in doing something like this, that racism is a wrong way to start. We've had in Richmond, we've had a number of Black individuals serve on town councils, the council presidents. Years ago in 1964, matter of fact, we had the first Black police chief in the state of Rhode Island. A lot of people don't know that. This is what you get when you're my age and you have a little history of this community. Yes, there are a lot of jerks out there, and I would like to apologize to them, but it's not my place to apologize. I'd be apologizing until I'm 150. But I think that we need to go positive and follow Donna Chambers' suggestion that we not blanket that with something that's going to be offensive to some of the older, longtime residents of this area. So that's just my thought.
Thanks, Bill. Barbara Capaldo.
Hi. Hello, this is Barbara Capalbo. I want to comment on the woman right before Bill Day. That was exactly my comment to this group. I think it's a fine idea, and I'm sure you'll move forward. But the real question that I have is, how is it going to be funded? Because if you don't put funding behind something, then you don't accomplish anything in the long term, in the long haul. And there's certainly nothing in this particular budget that you have for 2021 to accomplish it. So I am hoping that the group that you pull together, whatever you name it, will take seriously the concepts of financial and fiduciary responsibility, because you do need to not just say, well, this is the nice ideas we want to do, but this is the reality, the practical, this is the money that needs to be behind it, so that you can discuss it, and you certainly can remove some of it or add to it. But I do think the funding is just as important, or as the woman who spoke before, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, is absolutely correct, that you'll just be talking heads. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Linda Lyle.
Thank you, Chair. Lisa, thank you for bringing this to the committee tonight. I think it's about time, and I think it's very timely. I would wholeheartedly support any work that's done by the committee, and also I would support any funding that would be needed to implement any of the ideas that come forward. Again, thank you, and I totally support this.
Thanks, Linda. Mijah Hill.
Hello. It's actually easier than it looks. It's Maya. Thank you very much. That's okay. It's meant to be tricky. Thank you very much for this opportunity and this invite to have this discussion. I think that is the most important first step, is that we're able to talk about it, because we are here. We have many students, many of us that are here tonight have students that are here, and I have some students that have already graduated but we live in this community and we're not going anywhere. So just to have this open dialogue is very positive, and I have to say that I'm not surprised, but just to piggyback off of Silver Moon, I will be surprised and I will be proud when we actually have something come to fruition from this beginning. With that being said, I just have a couple of questions, and I don't know if they'll be answered tonight or how this is going to move forward. But that's my question: is what's the plan moving forward from after this meeting? What happens next? Is this just a vote to see if we want to move forward? And the second question is how will we be contacted, or will we be contacted, or is this something that the school committee will just take from this point forward? And after those two questions, I just would like to definitely say that I know those of us that are in attendance are very willing and very open to have this discussion. I'd be more than willing to give out all of my information, my contact information, and I'm absolutely always willing to have an open dialogue. And I believe that that is a good start. And I want to see this actually turn into something. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. So to your two questions, we do have, actually, I'll let Gina address the first part in terms of how to, well, before I do that, the first step is the committee has to vote on this. Once the committee votes and empowers the task force in terms of its creation, a point of contact will be established, and that is intended to go out to the community so that all people who want to participate can reach out, and Superintendent Picard will provide that. I don't know, Gina, if you had anything specific on that point of contact.
So what we will do is via school messenger, so everyone gets it, we will send out a Google form for you to put your contact information, your name, and then any other indications of what you would like to add. There'll be a spot for open-ended responses, but we'll collect it via Google form. And that will go out to everybody via school messenger this week upon approval of the school committee.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Donna Chambers.
I love these comments. I think everyone that has spoken tonight should be part of this task force. I look forward to an open and transparent task force meetings. I think these are discussions that need to happen and need to, as other people have said, be funded. I'm going to suggest very strongly that we look very, very closely at the curriculum. We have established in Charahoe humanities as opposed to just strictly history or just strictly English, as I understand humanities is meant to be. And in the past, we have had some pretty serious controversial discussions, if you recall, on material that was presented in one of it was the Ta-Nehisi Coates material that was presented, and we had politicians involved in that. It created a big ruckus in many ways. So we need to be very, very methodical and careful with strict regulations on how we go forward, and look closely at the curriculum that we are using and how we can maybe integrate this inclusion, the bias, how bias is handled in the curriculum, and open it up to a lot of discussion. Anyway, that's my point. I think it's great. We need to move forward. I hope Silver Moon and Maya are part of this discussion, but there are many others here on the call that would probably want to be involved in this. It's not easy. This is very, very difficult. It's very difficult conversations, but they, as everyone said, we need to happen. And I'm glad we as a committee are taking this up. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Craig.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, Lisa, thank you very much. I've been waiting for this my whole life. Martin Luther King's speech is at the core of my fabric of who I am. But I will agree with Bill and Clay. We have a lot of diverse opinions in this community. And let's just use some wisdom going forward. That's all I ask for. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Up next, we have Donna Spears.
Thank you. And thank you, Lisa, for bringing this point of order and conversation to the agenda tonight. And I want to go ahead and echo some of the sentiments I would already expressed this evening, that taking a critical look at curriculum and the education system that we're all stakeholders in. I am a parent of 4 children, 2 that are currently in the school system, 2 that will be entering within the next 4 years. And I'm also part of a community, an Indigenous community here that has generation after generation gone through the Chariho school system and seen that there has always been reactive measures taken to small incidents here and there. And that by having this discussion here, forming this task force, thinking critically about how we engage with our Indigenous communities and our non-Indigenous community is really an opportunity to show that leadership. And I think that for those of us who are wary about the terminology around race and who are uncomfortable talking about race, that's really passing the buck to our children to figure out. And I think we can be the adults in the room and engage with that language in brave and truthful ways. And we have that opportunity to do that right now. So I'm really thankful for this discussion, and I'm thankful that the snacks have kept up thus far, but they're running out. So I will go ahead and yield my time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. George Abbott.
Yes, I chaired the Affirmative Action Committee at DCYF for about 10 years, give or take a few years. And our main focus was increasing minority employment. And one, it gave minorities jobs, and it also gave our clients role models to look up to. So you achieve 2 purposes by doing that. So I would hope that this movement would include increasing minority employment as part of their objectives or goals. That's it.
George. Jennifer Sylvia.
Sorry. I just, I feel like I'm a Chariho graduate. I graduated in 2002. And I just would like to give my 2 cents that I really feel like the curriculum in Chariho has largely been very whitewashed. In history, race wasn't barely talked about. I feel like going through my years throughout Chariho, from all the way through kindergarten up until senior year. So I think that this is a great thing for us to adopt. I think, everything that Lisa said, and Silver Moon, Edwana, Maya, I think all of you have brought up like really good points, and it just feels like people are afraid of the word racism and including, like, they're getting offended by the word racism, and that's really, it's not, that absolutely, it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be called what it is. Whether you want to include other words in the title, to not put racism in this group really kind of misses the point, I think. And it's really unfortunate to me to be hearing the white people in this group being offended by the word racism. It's important to talk about. It's really, really important for our children to learn about, so that they see the world in all different colors, and they get to be educated on it. Because I really feel like as a student who went through the Chariho school system, you know, we don't live in a diverse area. School did not really talk about things that really, more time was spent on the founding of this country than was like the civil rights movement. We need to bring everything up to be a little bit more current. Not to say that the founding of this country wasn't important, but we really need to update the curriculum, I think, because the students need to know what's going on in the world. And it's very hard to talk about race when there's no diversity in this area, barely any diversity. You know, I moved to Virginia, and it wasn't until then where it was like, holy cow, like the world is much more than what Chariho displays it to be. So I just, you know, I really don't feel like we should be shying away from including the word racism in the group, because that's the point.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Justin Matthews.
Hi there. Thanks, everybody. I just want to start off by thanking Lisa for bringing this to the forefront. It's definitely much needed. I'm a graduate of Chariho, class of '97. I have 3 children who all attend Chariho schools. 3 children of color who have dealt with issues of racism and microaggressions in the school system. And we definitely need to have this work done. And I don't want to take up a lot of time. And I respect Bill a lot. I know he's been involved with the school for a long time. And I, you know, definitely respect everybody's experience here on the committee. But in terms of shying away from talking about racism or using the term racism or trying to like appease and the racist people that live in this community, to me is just totally the wrong direction to go in. You know, Clay talked about meeting the moment, and one of the moments right now that, you know, what we're talking about is race and racism across the country, and it needs to be discussed. In particular, it needs to be discussed with white kids who live in a predominantly white community who don't have experience and exposure with people of other cultures and backgrounds. And so I'm hoping we can move forward. I mean, I really don't care what the name of the committee is or the task force, as long as it's, you know, working on the right issues. But I just don't want to see us kowtow to the, you know, and shy away from doing the good work that needs to be done because we're afraid of what people in the community who are racist and prejudiced and bigoted might think. And I want to just, you know, emphasize that because I went to the Black Lives Matter rally that was held in Richmond, organized by the students, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I wrote an email to both the interim superintendent and the principal of the high school because it was not mentioned from either one of those forums. The superintendent didn't send anything. I'm sorry, not the interim superintendent didn't send anything out. The high school didn't send anything out. It was a fantastic event. I don't know how many more people would have showed up if people had known about it. And I really feel like the reason why it wasn't put out there is because people were afraid that the, you know, racist, bigoted, prejudiced people that live around here would be upset having that come from the school district. And we got to stop doing that, and we got to step up and do what's right. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Lisa, for bringing this forward.
Thanks, Justin. Bill Day.
Yes, I want to just clarify something. I'm not opposed to talking about racism. I'm not a racist. I was at the school committee following the Black Lives Matter. At the school committee level, recognized all of those students. I didn't have their names, but I recognized every one of them students at the school committee meeting. I didn't look for any publicity on that, but you know, it was stated that that they weren't recognized, but they were recognized first by me at the school committee following that rally or protest. So I, like I said, I've lived in this community a long time, and I know what some of the things are, and I just think that in some cases, this is going to be something that is going to be weighed on in the wrong way. I have a lot of what I consider friends in Charleston that are been Narragansetts. I played softball with them, basketball, all kinds of sports. The older ones, not the younger generation, because I'm too old for that now. But I don't think anybody of the Narragansett tribe would ever consider me as a racist. If they do, I would apologize to them profoundly, because I know the Spears for years and stuff like that. So it's not that I'm afraid about talking to her, but the reason I did buzz in, I had a concern, and I want to throw this out at the administration. We all got a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Harris concerned about. They sent a copy of a letter that they sent to the school administration team in March in relationship to the similar thing that we're talking about here right now. And the best of my knowledge, they never got any kind of response from the school administration team. So I'm asking right now, the new superintendent was not aboard then, but I'm asking her to tell me and the rest of the school committee why the Chariho administrative team didn't reply to Mr. and Mrs. Harris with their concern that they raised in March. This is something that I was concerned about. And I should have that answer along with every member of the school committee, is why this. I hope the school committee members read that email, but it did refer to a letter. They did refer to a letter that they sent in March to the team about problems that their son had with grades as it revolved around the Columbus Day situation. And best of my knowledge, the school, they never received a response. And this is, again, what we're talking about. We talk a good game sometimes, but we don't react and at least give Mr. and Mr. Harris the courtesy of sending them a note that they've even acknowledged in the fact that they received this letter. So I would implore the new superintendent to give me and the rest of the school committee an answer as to why their concerns weren't addressed by this Chariho administration team, as the letter stated. So that's my concern.
Thanks, Bill. So we're starting to drift off topic of the motion. So I want to pull everybody back to that. Bill, you bring up a good point. That would be something that we follow up with specifically, either as a request for items at the end of tonight's meeting, or ask Gina to follow up and explain that situation to the school committee offline. With respect, I know we keep circling back to language. There has been no motion made to alter Lisa's motion. So until there is, I think that the discussion of whether or not we use racism in the title is unwarranted. If at some point in time a committee member does put forth a motion, then we'll kind of jump into what language to use and why. But as it sits now, the motion stands unedited. So just as a point of order for the group. And then, so I have, let me go down this list. There's a lot of hands popping up. I do, so I've got Nell Carpenter next, then Linda McCallister, sorry, Lisa. Then I got Catherine, Donna Chambers. I saw a hand come up, Carla, but I don't know if that was dropped. And then I have David Stahl, and then Justin Matthews again. I see a hand waving.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Callahan. This is Nell Carpenter from Richmond. First, I'd like to thank Lisa Macruso for bravely and profoundly introducing this and putting this agenda item forward. I'm in full support, and I would like to be involved in the process and the discussion, whatever it may be. I would like to be involved in that process. I firmly believe that we need to, as a community, address that which is uncomfortable to us in order to grow. And that is all. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Nell. Linda McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say quickly, thank you, Lisa, for bringing this forward. Certainly timely and an urgent topic, and I think that the students in our district will also feel that and be very welcome to this idea. This has been a very important and meaningful discussion, so I thank you all for your input, and I just want you to know I will support this from the bottom up or the top down, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next we have Catherine.
Thanks. So I think we can see some of the uncomfortableness around this topic, and I think it's warranted for some of us who maybe don't face some of these issues on a daily basis. So I think we need to keep the name as it is. I think we need to acknowledge that racism is a problem, and how to be anti-racist, and get ready for uncomfortable conversations. Yeah, we might start a ruckus, but that's okay. I think it's time, you know. I think that we ask a lot of patience in this country of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And maybe it's time to stop asking for so much patience and maybe move forward and get some stuff done. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so we're winding this down. I do want to circle back. Sorry, did Carla have her hand up? I saw it and then it was canceled. So.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to say that this is long overdue, and that while a lot of adults may feel very uncomfortable around this topic, these are issues that many of the children in Charahoe are actually dealing with. So while you may be comfortable, if you don't have a child of color, they may have a friend that is of color, and then they are very aware of this topic. So we as adults are very late on this topic. So not only do we need the curriculum to change, but we also need education of the teachers. Often as a parent of color, when I go into the school to address the issue, the teachers have no idea that it was happening. They didn't even know what to look for. So I think we also need to educate our teachers as well. That's it.
Thank you, Carla. David Stahl.
All right, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
All right. So I just wanted to say, when I talk about broadening the name a little bit and the scope, you know, Donna made that suggestion early on, and I would encourage Lisa to consider amending her motion just to broaden the language a little bit. And that's not because I don't want racism to be a primary topic, or because I don't want us to use that word. I certainly do. I want us to tackle that first as a task force. I mean, that's the whole reason, because of the conversations going on about racism in our country, and both the systemic and the overt and the subtle and all those kind of things. So I really want us to tackle racism and tackle that head on, and use clear language about racism, and really go for that. My point was simply, I don't want us to have the task force be limited in other areas where we talk about other injustices. Some of it, there's ethnic prejudices that aren't racist prejudices that exist, and even right here in our community. And some folks are really aware of that. So I don't want us to have to stop somewhere because the task force was just to address racism. But I do want the task force to address racism first and immediately. I mean, I think that's the whole reason for forming it. So I just didn't want this task force to be limited, because I think when we do the really hard work on one conversation to address one type of injustice or one type of discrimination, it's really beneficial for us to take that same way of thinking and that same approach to a curriculum adjustment or to what we're teaching in the school or to how we're handling it or how we're approaching it, and take that and apply it to other things that come up that are other kinds of biases or prejudice, that sort of thing. So I just don't want our task force to be limited down the road. But I'm not by any stretch, when I say let's have a broader name for this task force, implying that I don't want us to talk about racism very directly. I certainly do, and wouldn't shy away from that language at all, because I think that's where the task force needs to start. I just want us to be able to address other types of things as they come up, using what we learn and what we glean from this and how we uncover things. The issues may be different, but many of the principles of why we have biases and how we address them and how we teach it through them and how we improve on them are the same. So I don't want us to be limited. I want us to be able to take what we're learning from the first issue of addressing racism in our community and then move it to other areas as well. That's all I'm looking for. But I would certainly want the task force to start with this issue of racism, and that's what's initiating the start of the task force and the conversation. Just don't want the name to be limiting.
Thanks, David. And I agree. I don't want it to be limited. I don't think the task force will have a limitation in scope with respect to that. Okay, so I have Justin Matthews, then Donna Chambers, then Lisa Macruso.
Hi, this is Batula, Justin's wife. I just wanted to acknowledge how beautifully this conversation went and how, even though some may be uncomfortable, look how easy it was for us to have this discussion. A task force would be as simple as this. I think that everything that would want to be accomplished would be possible. I think that goals would be able to be set and measured and achieved and tracked over years to come. I have strong faith in the leadership here. I'm proud to be a member of this community. I'm proud to have children of color here who are supported by both communities. That includes the Narragansett community and the Narragansett community and those of other ethnic backgrounds. As long as we're staying focused, I think the task force will be fine, or committee will be fine, or whatever we do decide to call it. I think that this is amazing and wonderful what we're doing. I think all of these perspectives and considerations are just exactly what we need. I'm very proud. So I'm waiting for this to happen. So I don't know about y'all. So
Thank you.
I'm hoping to get this to happen.
Thank you.
Because all I can hear is support. All I can see are allies, and I can't wait to see you all in public and work with you all, and my hand is raised. I'm here to help do the work. I will tell you, I've been doing the work my whole life, but I am here to do the work because I genuinely care, and my children who came in and out were excited because they started to hear the topic. So we're looking forward to this too. Let's not let our children down, please. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you. Well said. Okay, closing us out, we have Donna Chambers, and then I do want to circle back to Lisa Macruso for a rereading of the motion before this committee votes.
I just want to reiterate what David said, okay? We are not shying away from racism. We are going to hit racism head on, hopefully, this task force. I just wanted to make sure that we were inclusive in all kinds of biases. We've had issues with gender bias. We've had issues with anti-Semitism. We have issues with sexuality biases. In the bathroom issue that we encountered 2 or 3 years ago was a major problem. We need to talk about how to make sure we're instilling in all of our work, all of our curriculum, that all men and women are created equal. Bottom line, that's the message to the children. I think the children can teach us this, and I am proud to be part of such a diverse group here. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. But folks, I would like to put this to the committee for vote. Lisa, sorry, George, are you putting your hand up?
Yeah, quick. Hold on. What I'd like to see is to set a goal to increase minority employment, be a big part of this effort. I think that would go a long way to addressing the problems with racism. Char Hope, as I understand, is the largest employer in South County. I think that would be a good objective, would be to increase minority employment. That's it.
Thanks, George. Okay, I'm going to close discussion. I'm going to move this to vote. Lisa, will you please read the motion for us one more time?
Gladly. I make a motion for the school committee to form an anti-racist task force to examine the policies, practices, and curriculum of the Charahoe School District from the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Second.
Thank you so much. So this motion is already seconded. It's on the floor. I just wanted to make sure that it was reiterated before we take a vote. This is now before the committee. Those in favor of forming the task force? Aye.
Aye, absolutely.
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Any recusals? Outstanding. This is unanimous. Oof. Okay. Item letter F.
Hello, everyone. Yep, this is our school return to in-person meetings discussion. This item was on the agenda at the request of Catherine Giusti. We were allowed flexibility to offer virtual meetings per the governor's temporary executive order.
Thank you. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thanks. So I'm not really sure if it would take an extension of the executive order, but we have 117 people on this call. And I think at a typical school committee meeting at 7 p.m. in the library, we maybe get 3 or 4 people because it's hard. It just is. I mean, we see little kids on the call. I'm sitting and my kids have come in and out. This is so much more accessible to have it this way. So I guess I just didn't want to lose that accessibility piece. You know, I've beat that drum for the last however many years. People want to be informed. They want to be engaged. They want to participate, but it's hard. And it is hard to drive out to the library at 7 o'clock on a random Tuesday. So I don't know if there is a way that we can incorporate Zoom when we go back to in-person meetings. I know that would be tricky. And I don't even know if it would legally be possible. So this conversation might be premature, but I just wanted to put out there that I really would love to try to keep a virtual component to it because, again, 117 people, because people do care about what's happening. They do want to be informed. They do want to participate. It's just hard. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. I have Bill Day next, and then George Abbott, and then Craig was on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think we're sending a wrong message to all of the parents that we're asking them to send their kids back to the school when we are reluctant to occupy the building ourselves. I just feel that, you know, if we are going to request the teachers and the parents to trust us that we have a safe environment, that us not coming into the building is sending the wrong message. If there is going to be such a concern for including a large number of people, again, going back because I'm an old timer and I have a history here, we used to hold school committee meetings in the middle school auditorium, and it worked. So if it's going to be the situation where you feel there's going to be needs for a large number of people, we certainly could hold the school committee meetings in the auditorium at the middle school, which we did probably 25 years ago. You know, I just feel that, again, we need to show the community that this building is safe, and we're willing to step in it on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So just on the point that there's two aspects of this. When this committee will return to, you know, the face-to-face type of meetings, and Bill, I agree with your statement. I think it's hard to lead from behind. So, but the second component to that comment from Catherine is, how do we continue to provide easy access for community members to participate in school committee meetings? And I will say that the virtual platform provides, you know, our attendance has been outstanding. So I don't have a good answer for that. It's actually pretty difficult to manage a virtual and live meeting because, well, it's actually pretty difficult to do that with what we have today. So maybe that's something that we reach out to IT with, Gina, and see what kind of options we have in that space. I will say it would be very difficult for committee members to participate in both formats simultaneously. So something to think about. George Abbott.
Yes, I've always had an issue with the parking at the library. If there's a sports event going on simultaneously, it's almost impossible to find a parking space. And you have people parking illegally out in the street, or having to drive over to the technical school, which is poorly lit. You know, and there are issues there that need to be addressed in terms of parking. You know, whether you can solve it virtually or by changing the meeting location at Charahoe, something needs to be done.
Thanks, George. Craig Luzon.
Catherine, I 100% agree with you. I've been wanting to meet in person for a while because I go to work every day, but I'm really getting tired of this format myself. I'm a people person. But I think the OMA applies to us as a committee. It doesn't necessarily apply to people that are sitting in the audience. So maybe there's a way we could find a balance there. I would hope with the direction I see our country moving in, that I would love to see 100, 200 people out in the audience live. And then we could really make some action. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thanks, Craig. Hold on a second. I'm just kind of jotting some names down so I don't lose it. I do see a lot of, I try and follow the chat as it's happening, but so I do see a lot of folks in favor of a dual approach. So we will look into that. I understand it's bedtime and dinner time and those kind of things. So, and we really do want that participation. Sheila Grover.
Hi. Yeah, I also want to throw my hat in to say that a dual approach is not only, you know, really desirable for getting lots of people there. I also think that you're going to want to have that option for the school as well as for the committee meetings, so I don't think it's being different. I think it's being different to insist that it be in person only, as far as making it in tandem with what you're asking the school children to do. Now, I could be wrong about that. That's later on discussion. We don't really know that to be true, but I am just hoping that it mirrors the thinking that there will need to be a choice in attending in person or online. And also, can you beat 118 participants? No, you cannot. And I really think that we should stick to this Zoom thing as long as we possibly can have it involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Clay.
Ryan, you actually captured in your comments my thoughts, so I'll leave it there.
Thanks, sir. Jennifer Sylvia. if you're speaking, Jennifer, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry.
Right.
In person is great, but having the ability to have the option to dial into a Zoom call, I think would be inclusive of much more of the whole community. And there are parents that maybe one works first shift and the other might work second shift. So it's difficult to get babysitters. And I think in-person meetings at 7 o'clock at night on a school night, you know, it's difficult for a lot of parents to be able to put the time in to go to an in-person meeting. But this would allow parents to definitely be able to attend the meetings on a more regular basis and be able to feel like they have a voice. So I don't think that, you know, it would be great to be able to see both options be available even when COVID goes away, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to kind of recap, I do see most people are in favor of some sort of dual technology approach. So we will reach out to Sean and the IT team to see how we can do that. There is, we've tried it once before. It was a bit of a challenge, but we will look into that. And I think one of the action items coming out of this will be reporting out at our next meeting what we found and how we'll be able to facilitate that approach. So I show Catherine, David Stahl, Donna Chambers, and Lisa Macruso. So Catherine?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a good conversation. This has been one of my favorite meetings ever, quite honestly. Lots of participation, lots of talking, which is so awesome. So I appreciate it that we're going to look into it. Thanks.
Awesome. Mr. Stahl.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, 8 minutes ago, wanted to say I agree with everyone. Of course, we need to do both. It's gotten a lot easier. I think, Ryan, Mr. Chairman, I would just look for us at whatever we can do as a committee to pass whatever motion we need to pass that keeps us in line with Robert's rules, but allows the chairperson to have some sort of a virtual or digital clerk that's standing by and helping him. In my other professional environment, we work with sometimes 100 people physically present and 40 or 50 virtually present. And it can absolutely be overwhelming for one person to moderate all that. So what we've done is found somebody who's a moderator of one of the online platforms and someone else is a moderator of the other online platform, and they can watch those and speak to the chairperson or whoever's you know, moderating. So there's a lot of different ways that we can approach that. And I think we can just pass something as a committee, Ryan, that will make sure that we've covered that the chair has some extra arms and hands, because we can't expect you to see everything at once, but we can certainly pass something as a committee. So I appreciate that you said we'll bring something to the next meeting. I was gonna simply ask or make a motion if I needed to, but I think you're already gonna do that, to bring something to the next meeting. But I'm happy to participate in a conversation with Sean too about some of the ideas of multiple moderators, but sticking with Robert's rules. I think we need to do it. It'll be great.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Totally agree. So Donna Chambers.
Ditto, David. I was just going to say the same thing. We have the most awesome technology group, and I would be shocked if they can't figure this out. So let's move forward with the hybrid meeting idea. Thank you.
Perfect. Lisa Macruso.
I'll yield because it's been said, but Catherine, I think you do need to make it into a motion. Let's formalize it and vote.
In terms of, I think what I'm hearing is we need to find a technical solution on how we would provide a dual approach to school committee meetings. I don't know if we need a motion in order to do that. I think that's just a deliverable for the next, unless there's a majority of committee members who do not want to do that, but I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. So if it's okay, I'll just simply say that we will address it. We'll come back at the next meeting and we'll propose some solutions.
Excellent, sounds good.
And I think we can vote to adopt the plan then.
Perfect. Okay, folks, I'm going to close this discussion. I think we've got action items that we will work towards for the next school committee meeting. This brings us to probably, this brings us to letter G. So Gina, I'm going to turn this over to you, please.
Okay, so I'm going to present the school reopening plan that was submitted to RIDE on July 17th. We did post the plan on the website, but I have a slide deck that I'll share with you now to talk through. Let's see. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide deck. It's loading. Okay, great.
I can see it.
Perfect. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I'm excited. I think we're at 120 attendees. And basically what I'll do is I'll review the scenarios that we're opening. I just want to give a disclaimer that as a district, we don't decide which phase we implement. That's determined by the Department of Health guidance based on the data that comes out regarding COVID, along with the governor. So they'll let us know. Right now, we are planning for a full reopening based on the current guidance. And we are getting weekly updates, so we will be able to sort of flip that switch when necessary and when directed. The plan is fluid and flexible. And with this virus, new information is constantly being provided to us. We have been meeting every day and throughout the weeks with 3 subcommittees, with the goals being safety as our #1 priority for all staff and students, continuing to gather feedback and iterate as necessary, and really continuing to communicate to our entire community and our stakeholders. We formed 3 subcommittees based on the RIDE guidance. We had school governance and operations, teaching and learning, and health and wellness. We have over 60 members across those 3 subcommittees that include teachers, administrators, support professionals, parents, students, school committee member, district administrators, school nurses, and et cetera, along with our physician for the district, Dr. Menlove, who has really gone across committees to support the work. So like I said, we'll begin with the full in-person. That's 100% of our kids, 100% of the time being educated. But I want to be clear, in all scenarios, our goal is to educate all students. If we return to the school buildings, many of the protocols that we'll talk about tonight are going to be implemented regardless of the phase. So whether we're in partial or limited, you'll see many of the protocols consistent. We have had some challenges and we're continuing to think through those. Transportation is one of them. Physical distancing and really thinking about how we provide students and staff with the training necessary to understand how that works, along with mask wearing, as well as providing virtual learning for absences. So on the slide deck, there is a link to mask wearing. It's a draft that we've been working on as a team, a steering committee. And as a district, we will be requiring our students and staff to wear masks unless they are unable to do so medically. We will have masks available to all staff and students who don't have one, who lose one, and really think through the education of that piece and why it's important as a community that is focused on our vision of 2023 of global citizenship. What does it mean to be a good citizen? Public health is one of those areas that we want to make sure both our staff and our students are thoughtful around that work. In the partial plan, this is a revision. We received feedback from RIDE last week, all the superintendents, that we must prioritize our elementary school students and our transition grade 5 to be in school every day, whether it's full in-person or partial. So whether we go partial or full in person, we are prioritizing K to 5 to be in-person learning every day, where the middle school and high school during partial, grade 6 to 8 and 9 through 12 will be Monday, all day virtual if it's partial. And again, to reiterate, the Department of Health will tell us which phase that we're implementing. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're using the alphabet A through J going in person, and K through Z being virtual, and then alternating that on Thursday and Friday where K to Z would be in person and A through J will be virtual. If it happens that a family has two different last names that don't fall like that, we would make those accommodations to ensure that a family was staying on the same days. With the limited plan, that's when we would be required to move to 15 per pod. And that's where we have been asked as the school administrators to review the data and to prioritize the populations that are either struggling with distance learning, differently abled population, transition grades, K to 1, grade 5, and grade 9, as examples of how we could prioritize. And then the last phase would be full distance learning. And that would be all students working from home, which is what we had all experienced in the spring. So we continue to get health guidance. The Department of Health is creating what they're calling a playbook to be released. They're anticipating that mid-August. That will give us additional guidance. They have provided some preliminary guidance, so that's what I'll talk to today. We do have screening procedures that we'll need to implement where there's a daily screening, what they're calling the self-attestation form. The Department of Health is recommending that families and staff download the Crush COVID app for daily reminders. That's not a requirement, that's just a suggestion from the Department of Health. We would be sending out the self-attestation form, and in our plan, it talks to basically a signature form from a parent, understanding their responsibility to do that self-check. Same with staff, and then that we would be updating that form should any changes need to be made based on updates from the Department of Health, and or if we need to ensure that we get the proper protocols reviewed. So I'm gonna just, this is blocked, but
Actually, Gina, I want to take a question from the participants. Robin, I see you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much, Ryan. And thank you, Gina. We appreciate all of the hard work that's gone into this, so thank you. My first question, and you may be getting to this at some point, but will the phases that we're going to be at, will that be set across the board for all of the school districts within the state, or will it be district by district?
So actually, that's a question in the RIDE frequently asked question document that we have posted on our website. Right now, we're waiting for the guidance. It looks, we were all asked to do the same planning phase, but how the Department of Health determines the phase, it could look different, which I think makes people anxious. For example, the questions around if we have one school that has an issue, it would be one school closing and the rest could remain open. So we're awaiting the Department of Health's playbook for further information. So we don't have any clear answers about what that will look like yet. But that is a question we've asked as well.
Great, thank you. And my only other thought is, would it be possible now that we've put plans out or we've seen the preliminary plans to kind of do another run of the survey to see how parents' feelings are now that we've seen this?
Correct. We're planning on, and actually, and you're correct, it's later on in the presentation, that we will be putting on additional staff and student surveys. And I'm going to talk more about that because it'll touch on why.
Great, thank you. Because I think one thing that I can just speak of that I've heard a lot of families is those in elementary school that, you know, or across the board, that virtual options would be desired. So I think that's, you know, something that we'll have to think about. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Back, yes.
Thanks, Robin. So we have an additional question. I see Rebecca. Please state your name and what town you're with.
Hi there. Thank you very much for taking my call. My name's Rebecca Gwaltney, and I'm in Richmond. So I have 2 children going to Richmond Elementary School. Just for clarification on the mask wearing and the screening process, I have submitted these questions, so maybe they'll come out later. I'm a little bit concerned with the screening of a paper form signed by a parent. I think we all know in public schools that sometimes people have to work and they sign a form and put their kids in the school day, and then the nurse has to triage some sick kids about halfway through the day when the Tylenol wears off. I didn't know if there were any additional measures you were considering for the district that might take more time. I know like the thermal scan temperatures are options used in a bunch of other countries where schools have opened. They're, as far as budget goes, they're not that expensive. They're not 100% foolproof, but maybe that additional step before putting 25 kids in a classroom with 4.5 to 6 feet apart might make parents feel like there's a little more effort into that screening process. My second question about the masks at the elementary school level, they're not required as far as I know from the preliminary plan at Richmond Elementary School when there's 25 children or up to 25 sitting in a classroom. So that was 2 areas of concern right off the bat for me, where we hear on the news masks and social distancing, and those things are not necessarily going to happen. To the best of our ability, they will, but you know, that's some of the things that came up when I'm picturing a classroom with 23, 25, 20 kids, you know, not having masks when they're sitting at their seat, and the screening, I feel like that might be a little bit of a something we could tweak slightly. And then my other concern that relates to those is our nursing staff. I saw in one of the FYI PDFs that the middle school nurse is no longer going to be with Charahoe. I'm concerned about, you know, the teachers and making sure that they are well prepared and have backup staff, because I know when people are in pods, if somebody gets sick, you can't just divide the kids up in other classrooms going into this. So those are a few of my things. I appreciate everybody's work. I don't think there's ever, you know, going to be one right answer. But those are just some quicker questions I just had. And I thank you for the time and thank you for listening.
So I will start with the mask wearing. So the guidance does say that when they are in their pods, in their classroom pods, and they are keeping their 6 feet of distance, they can take their masks off. That continues to be the guidance from the Department of Health, but they would be required to wear the mask on the bus, off the bus, in the hallways, at any time that distancing couldn't be kept. So that's where and I know that many of our administrators are thinking through outdoor classrooms, opportunities for breaks to be able to do the distancing and ensure that what we do know is we're really going to have to be mindful of managing our masks, but also stamina. I'm a mother of a 10-year-old who has not left the house, but when she did start leaving the last couple of weeks for appointments, you know, kept touching her face. And it really sort of alerted me to the fact that that building of stamina as a parent is going to be really key to our students' success with the mask. It's going to happen where they're touching and they're playing and they're trying to figure out how to manage it. So really working with your children on a comfortable mask, something that they are practicing and building their stamina in, will be helpful. We anticipate sending out additional guidance in our August update with videos and references of how you can start thinking about doing that. So we're sort of training our students to be prepared as well as our staff. The nursing staff have been a key component to as you can imagine, to this planning. They are helping us draft protocols and how we access the nurse, what that looks like, how do we make them mobile so students are not coming to the nurse, but they're thoughtful about what that looks like. So that's in draft, and are waiting on additional guidance from the Department of Health for support around that guidance. And the temperature checks, we were told this week that RIDE has acquired temperature thermometers, 1 thermometer per every 50 student, anticipated for a delivery regarding around mid-August. So we can rethink our screening process if we, in the elementary school, may be easier than in middle and high school. But I think that's a constant conversation that we continue to have. So just know all your feedback. I've noted all your notes. I want to make a note too that on the website is my last letter that was sent last Wednesday. So if there's a question that you have that you feel you really want to make sure we capture, although I am writing them down here, There's a Google form for you to add any question, and that is also for our students. If our students have questions, or not just our family members or parents that they have, we are developing a district frequently asked question document to support the answers, as well as this video of the school committee meeting being posted on our website.
Thank you. Yeah, I did read for you some of the frequently asked questions from our principal, Sharon Martin, who was did a FAQ document, which was fantastic. Some of these larger ones I did send through that document, and I know there must be inundated emails and very numerous questions, so thank you for answering those. One more last comment I'll make so I don't take up a second time later. I think a distance option would be a great option for some parents. So I know that my son has asthma. I know other children, their parents are on the front line. I know substitutes were in demand last year. I can just see this, a couple small things exponentially getting problematic. So I'm thankful we have all these plans in place. I thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. And that's all. Thank you very much.
So, and I'll reiterate this, but I always think redundancy is fluency, so it's always good to do it more than once. What we're thinking about, we are reviewing the feasibility of a distance learning option. The current guidance from RIDE is that we are required, it would be a note from the doctor to determine if your child's medically fragile. That would place your child in distance learning. And also what they would say is that this opt out in the frequently asked question document, can parents opt out of full in-person learning? We're waiting on the Department of Health's guidance along with RIDE to give us additional information. But we as a district are getting feedback from our families asking will we have this option? So we are definitely reviewing that as an option. We would like to be able to think through that, as well as you'll be getting a survey, if not Friday, at the beginning of the week, next week, to discuss. We would need to know how many students would be interested in that, if we have the staffing to be able to do that. So it involves some additional planning, but we will be asking those questions in a future survey to be able to sort of capture what the needs are of our families.
Thank you, and thank you for being open to feedback. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So I have a number of hands still up. I'm actually going to put a pin in this so that Gina can get through the rest of her foils and then take up questions again because I anticipate some of them will be answered. So I do have Nell and then Silver Moon, Jennifer, and Kristen next in order. So Gina, if you'll continue on, then we'll take up questions at the end.
So we are advising any staff or student who feels ill or shows symptoms, they must remain home. We have cleaning protocols, and we are going to put those protocols in writing for our families and post those as well on the website. We are training all of our custodians to understand what those protocols are and what it means by high touch, how often, and the principals are working closely to think through those cleaning opportunities with their custodians and our director of facilities. I've touched on the mask. Like I said, we've been working on a draft of our mask wearing, which is linked to the presentation. It's a couple of pages, but it goes through our plan really about educating our families around the importance of the mask wearing and when and how we're expecting students and staff to wear them. So we've had a lot of questions about responding to potential COVID cases, and any student in school or staff for that matter that could have symptoms on that self-checklist or on that checklist for nurses will be placed in an isolation room. We don't have all the criteria of the isolation room that's coming from Department of Health in that playbook due out August 17th, but we do know that if a student has any of those symptoms, the parents will be notified immediately and must pick up their child within the hour. So we will be asking parents to ensure that their emergency forms are updated so that there is an adult on that form that can get to the school within the hour. And for staff, it really would be that they're reporting to the office that they're leaving because they're not feeling well. Parents and guardians would need to then seek medical advice, and this is right from the RIDE's document. This is not something the district created. This is from the guidance. So you would seek medical advice for a student within 48 hours and then schedule a COVID-19 test as needed determined by your medical physician. And then we as a school would ensure the cleaning of all the affected areas of where that student was in the classroom and in the school. If it's confirmed that a student or a staff member has COVID, then, and they test positive, there'll be a period of isolation determined by the Department of Health, and they will work with us side by side as the guidance to let us know what the next steps would be. And that would involving what the quarantine would look like. Any symptomatic students obviously will not be permitted to return to school until there's documentation from the medical provider that indicates testing was negative. And if it was positive, again, the Department of Health will work directly with the school and the district to determine next steps. That hasn't been fleshed out with the Department of Health, but they have told us that they will work side by side if there is a confirmed case. So moving on that, if they're negative and there are no restrictions they would need documentation to tell us that the medical professional, their doctor, is saying that the student or staff member are able to return and they are no longer contagious and have any symptoms that are of concern. We are awaiting, again, the Department of Health's guidance, what they're calling their playbook, to handle any situation if a parent or family member has symptoms or test positive. And again, right now, it just says that there's more information for us once they get that. So that's an area we're still holding on and waiting on guidance from RIDE. So the teaching and learning opportunities that we're highlighting are really what's new or shifted and different based on the surveys that went out not only in the spring, but also what we've collected this summer. So I know Jane's on the line, and I'm gonna let her talk through the teaching and learning work. She led that subcommittee.
Sure. So from the survey results from the staff and from parents, one of the things talked about assessments. So we have got guidance and training on how to provide STAR assessments virtually. So we will administer those at the beginning of the year to identify learning progress or loss. In terms of attendance, that's something we worked on in our committee a lot because there was a lot of feedback that for some that didn't work. So we will be taking it within the first 15 minutes during a live, this is changes for elementary, so a live morning meeting with the teacher each day. And teachers in all grades, pre-K to 4, will use the Google Classroom to make sure that they assign what the dates and times are and what assignments are. Also, teachers are going to provide virtual access for students to keep the live meetings open throughout the day, or as long as they're not working one-on-one or in small groups or it's during lunchtime. And we're also going to work to develop a training for parents on how to upload completed work. They don't have to worry about, first of all, bringing it in and dropping it off at the school, but also in getting timely feedback back. And we're also working on being able to provide students in grades 1 through 4, actually, with a Chromebook on a one-to-one basis. So that way, if we do have to go virtual again, then the students will be more familiar with a Chromebook and be able to use that. For students in grades 5 through 12, again, all major assessments would be administered, including the STAR assessments, which we use at the beginning of the year to really help us to identify if there's any learning progress or loss in English and math. Again, attendance taken within the first 15 minutes during a live meeting, except that not just the beginning of the day, but during each period and block. And that was from feedback from parents on they wanted more accountability for their students in terms of their participation. Teachers will maintain contact with the students during the entire period or block. And we have specific guidelines for all teachers about communicating the agenda, the resources, the product, the goal, and really be clear with the deadlines and due dates and times for parents, and consistency in the use of the platforms. So to be able to have our teachers using Google Meet, Google Classroom, or Canvas at the high school, that was a communication and consistency was something that was important to parents. Also, as part of our teaching and learning committee, a lot of the work we had to do and questions we had to answer were related to training and professional learning for staff. So what you see on this slide is just some of the topics we have planned for August for our professional learning. And those are all different topics and choice and personalized professional learning that we'll be able to provide teachers before school starts. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And thank everybody on, we had, like I said, over 60 members on the subcommittee, and this truly takes a village. And this would not have come to fruition without all the hard work from every member of those subcommittees. So, and they continue to be ready and waiting to be able to support the iterations of these plans. So this is the question that I think a lot of people have been asking, especially for us in the last couple of weeks, as we've seen data start to shift and schools start to reopen or change their plans. And this is taken right out of the guidance that was updated in the FAQ for RIDE. That if they're saying if the Rhode Island Department of Health and RIDE and the governor's office decide that our health data supports 100% full in-person return to school scenario, they hope that families will feel comfortable and confident allowing children to return to school in person. If a child's doctor decides that due to a medical condition, the child is too vulnerable to return to in-person learning, the district is responsible for providing that child with an equitable distance learning option. With that being said, we will still be sending out our survey to see how many parents are interested in an option if it can be accomplished and if it's feasible based on our review of that data. So we've also, I think all of us know that our social emotional well-being, both adults and students, is something we really have to be mindful of. Charahoe has a website dedicated to this work, and the link is on the slide deck, and the slide deck will get posted on the website tomorrow, and everyone will have access to that. We're also pursuing an employee assistance program through the trust called All One Health, and this is an opportunity for all of our staff to really be able to have additional supports. As we know, COVID impacts us very differently, and it may not only just be ourselves, but our family members, the stress, anxiety, isolation. So this would allow also our staff to be able to have access to additional social emotional supports and mental health. Transportation is something we're still working through. We have added to the transportation form an opt-out plan. Under the current guidelines, right now it's one child per seat staggered, so a child by the window, a child by the aisle, a child by the window, a child by the aisle with masks on. And our first survey said over 90% of our families would like a bus. So that will be very difficult to accomplish with those numbers, which is why we've been, put out the opt-out bus form. The other thing too is if we do have the ability to look at the distance learning options, that may also remove numbers from the busing. And again, we'll be thinking through that over the next 2 weeks as we get survey data back, asking how many families would be interested if that was possible. So what we're doing is continuing to think through the routes of that busing. We know that we have been asked to prioritize our youngest learners, K through 5, to ensure that they prioritize first for busing, and then we'll work from there. We've gotten great feedback from families about thinking through allowing juniors and seniors who can drive, and if there's additional parking available. So our director of facilities is working closely with the school administrators to think through what that could look like and where we would have additional and where we could find additional spaces if that's an option. We're also asking parents to think creatively if they can drive their child to school or carpool. We're asking that they, if they could consider opting out to alleviate that need and try to get as many students on the bus as possible. Based on the current guidance, like I said, which is one per seat. So as you know, we've been collecting feedback ongoing. Our first survey, again, just to reiterate that we didn't have our plan ready. This was sort of a barometer of what people were thinking at that time. And we know things shift as data shifts. So that's why we'll ask new information and gather additional data in this next, the next 2 weeks. So we had about 1,119 families respond to our survey. Over 75% of the families at that time were leaning towards or ready to return to full in-person learning. We had 1% say to us that they're not willing to return at all, and approximately 23% asking us to consider a virtual learning option. And like I said, over 90% requesting that they will need bus transportation. When we did a faculty survey and a staff survey, we had overall 45% of our faculty extremely comfortable or comfortable to return back to a full in-person learning based on current data. So you can see we're split about 50%. And 10% of our staff said they may try to request a medical leave. We received 301 responses from staff. This is why when I talk about the feasibility of a distance learning option, we will need staff. So we're hoping that if we are able to provide that option, that we may be able to think creatively about how we can utilize staff that may otherwise take a medical leave. So that's something we're trying to also explore. And in addition to last week on the website, like I mentioned earlier, there is a document on the letter on our main page that is collecting additional questions from parents, students, community that have questions about the reopening plan. So if you have a question that you want to make sure it gets included in our district FAQ, you can go to the website and put your question there. I'm also keeping track of some of the questions that were being asked tonight, and I know all our principals are collecting those questions and working with myself and Jane this week at our summer advance to be able to respond to the families in the district FAQ. And there is links on the slide when it gets posted to both the family survey results and the staff survey results. Communication is always important. It's even more important in times like this when we continue to get new information and updated weekly. The assistant superintendent and myself are constantly on updates with the superintendents across the state. We're getting new information across the nation, as well as with the Department of Health, and we're doing, I think, a very good job making sure we keep updated and revise our plan as necessary based on that work, and that it's happening because of the staff, the students, the community, stakeholders, the families that are involved in our subcommittee work, along with our teachers and support professionals. So this communication will be ongoing. We will continue to update all our families via our district-wide email messaging. We also know that we have many new families, and that was updated this weekend, so they'll ensure that communication, but we are also ensuring that all of our school messages are going live on our website. So as a parent, if you're not sure if you received something and you go on the website, you should find it there. I've also linked that. And like I've said before, coming soon is our district FAQ. And then what we will be putting into place is school-level virtual forums where myself, the assistant superintendent, Jane Daly, and the school administrative team will be taking questions school by school to be able to get parents the information they need specific to their level. And if you're a parent at multiple schools, you will not need to attend every single one. We will record those, and we believe that the district FAQ is another way for parents to get the information that they need. So our next steps are the additional surveys going out to both staff and families to gather the new data based on the plan being released and where what they're feeling right now and the options that they would like to have. RIDE has told us we should have our feedback no later than July 28th, with the goal being our final plan. And when I say final, it's iterative based on new information. So as we make changes, we will continue to update our families. And we will continue to, like I said, we'll hold the virtual forums, and then our goal is to have our district FAQ finalized and completed no later than August 1st for our e-update. So that's the high level review. Ryan, if you want to open up to questions.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to open this up. There are quite a few. So I do want to thank the folks who are on Gina's staff who've been able to respond in some of the comments within the chat. That's been fairly lively. But if we don't get to those specific questions, we'll try to either read through them or give you an opportunity to audibilize them before the night's over. So I have Nell Carpenter up first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What an incredible presentation just received. I've made a million notes. I've got a lot of errors. I've got a lot of arrows directing me to this because my initial email that I had sent to Dr. Callahan, you, Ms. Picard had just addressed a couple of them. So I've got some X's here and some plus marks there. I certainly want to express my gratitude and appreciation to the district. Unprecedented times, you guys are doing a phenomenal job, and I can't give you kudos enough. I realize that the partial plan details a mix of in-person and virtual learning. As you had described, 1/4, roughly 25% of those polled of the roughly 1,000 want virtual learning. I'm actually one of those. I didn't participate in this poll, but I am one of those. So if another poll comes out, you're going to get another one from me. My question is, you've answered that if I am a parent who wants my child who actually excelled with distance learning, am I able to opt out? You've given me the answer for that. So there's an X in that. Number 2, with Charahoe having exceeded many other districts, our virtual learning program was one to be modeled after throughout the state, one to be envied throughout the state. With Charahoe having exceeded these many other districts with our exceptional distance learning platform, can we perhaps figure a way to market this to other parents who in other districts who share my same concern and want their children to distance learn in the same fashion that we market the Career Center and CALA, and possibly creating a new revenue stream? I'm not trying to capitalize on the opportunity, but if there are other parents out there who share my same concern in other districts, perhaps this is something that we may be able to capitalize on. Just a thought. We excelled. We did a phenomenal job, and as I said, we were envied. I have 2 concerns regarding transportation. The siblings, are siblings able to sit with each other?
Yes.
Okay, that's a yes there. And what in regards to tech support for students? For instance, my son, who's a freshman, his Chromebook was frequently deciding the video didn't want to work. And I certainly can't fix it, nor am I going to try. What are the options as far as tech support are concerned when someone is virtually learning? What are our options there?
So at the middle school, high school, we have help desks that are booking by appointment or sometimes they can get in there remotely. For the elementary school, it can be a little trickier. We're also looking at thinking through a teacher technology technician, possibly a stipend. So these are some of the things that we're working on and thinking through. But we recognize, and our IT recognizes that they need to have a very robust plan of thinking through flexible hours and how we can support our students who do have the technology and Chromebook. So they're always welcome to feedback, and they are a great team. And if they could, like someone said earlier, if anyone can figure out, it's that team. So I wrote the question down for them so that we could sort of think through some messaging to our families around what that support can look like and how to access that support. It is on the website. I know there's a technology page that you go to and you can get the appointment. But if parents have suggestions on how to make that more robust, they would like to see, please add that to the questions in the additional comments, and we can continue to work on that. I've already jotted it down, so I'll be talking to our IT.
Thank you. And lastly, I just want to reiterate the fact that nearly a quarter of the individuals polled in that most recent survey of approximately 1,000 want virtual learning. So if this is something that we can offer, not just to our students here in Charahoe, for parents who don't feel comfortable, such as myself, perhaps other districts as well, maybe this is an avenue that we can explore that will create a revenue stream. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again to the committee. Thank you, everyone. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, Neil. Silver Moon LaRose.
Okay. My question actually came up in the chat. We were just having a question in regards to the attendance policy. Right now, you know, your kid's not feeling well. You keep them out of school, you have to get a doctor's note. And I can see that very quickly getting out of hand for every sniffle and cough, if that's still expected. And also, there's a lot of limitations on even being able to get into the pediatric center. You know, they're getting an appointment. I just see that becoming a nightmare at some point. So just wanting to know a little bit about how that attendance policy is going to be, if
So,
at all.
yes, we are actually looking at many policies, attendance being one of them. For review, we are thinking through options, for example, in Power School, where we would track attendance, you know, distance learning, because what we will do is if the child is absent, like you said, not because they have COVID, but maybe I don't feel well, mom, and then we just keep them home to be on the safe side, which is what we're asking everybody to do. There's a check for like, distance learning today due to being sick, which will still count as attendance. So what RIDE has told us is they're going to provide us with additional information to support attendance, but they asked us to then go into our attendance policies and think through how we, what would make sense for our district to ensure that we're capturing attendance in a very thoughtful way, and that so that we can answer the question, how do we know students are learning? Because if they're attending, then they're learning, and that would really be a barometer for us. With that being said, the doctor's note, we've also asked RIDE to speak to the Department of Health about, you know, if everybody's staying home, and typically we'd push through, right? We're all from the generation of, okay, you know, unless you have a fever, go to school, and that's not going to be the case anymore. So we need our medical professionals to understand that, our pediatricians, our primary care doctors, for the staff to know that if this is the expectation, how can the Department of Health support that need, and the governor be able to push what else, and how can we help with the telehealth was an example of what she did during the executive order, and many medical professionals provided that. We're hoping that that's also an option, but we've asked that same question, and they have told us that with their playbook, we should be receiving additional guidance.
Thank you. Okay, so two committee members do have comments, and then after them we'll have Jennifer Sylvia and Kristen Haxon. So first up we have Donna Chambers.
First of all, I love the idea of making money on our brilliant tech programs, but that, to my understanding, took a major effort by our administration over the last 5 or 6 years. Jane Daly centered all of the PD around including the technology. We were ready for this pandemic when it happened because we were prepared. My question about the reopening, and it's not a popular one, but Gina, has there been any discussion of having or requiring all adults who are going back into the school buildings to be tested before they get in? It's very easy to get tested in Rhode Island now. It's pretty efficient. So I would think that parents would feel better if they knew that at least the adults in the building have been cleared of the coronavirus, don't have positive testing.
So we've asked that question as well, and the response from the Department of Health and RIDE is that at this time there are no plans to do massive testing of staff coming back to work. Again, they said that their playbook will be out mid-August, so things, as we all know, change day to day, so that may shift. My understanding is there is a possibility, and again, this is more of people having conversations and talking of possible mobile units being sent out, to be able to think through, if we could do it, what that would look like.
Good, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. David Stahl.
Yeah, so just a couple thoughts from me. First of all, I want to thank Gina. She's been super efficient in cranking through this stuff and answering questions really well. And of the two Ginas from Providence I know, I think she's the better one. She's really communicating things well. So I appreciate that. And I also wanted to say, as a committee member, I'm sort of on board right now with the parents that are leaning in the direction of a virtual option. My wife and I filled out that survey, and my wife is adamantly excited about a virtual option only. And we're trying to come to terms with it in our own household. And I know some of the other households represented here can probably share that or relate to that experience. I have my youngest going into kindergarten, my oldest going into 12th grade, and I would love for them to have a normal school experience and go into the building and that sort of thing. But nobody's going to have a normal experience this year anyway. So I just want to make sure that some parents here and the people that are on here hear that some of us are also, even as committee members, leaning toward a virtual option being better for our families. But we're trying to figure out the best way for this to happen and the best way to get all this done for the most people. One of the concerns that I have is if we have a large number, like 200 or 300 households that decide they don't want to come back into the school, that if we don't have the virtual option, and I know right now we're waiting on the other Gina, we're waiting on the state to give us some direction, but if we don't have the virtual option, that a large number of people are going to opt for homeschooling. And the problem that creates for me as a committee member is then we have even less control over the direction and less accountability of the learning. And then when all those students are not going to homeschool out of principle, as many do, they're going to homeschool out of necessity in the pandemic. And then of course they're going to re-enter the school system when they deem it safe to do that. And I think that re-entry will create a lot of difficulty, because where were those students and what was their learning during the time out? So that's just something major that I want us to think about is if we don't have the option, how many people will opt out, and what does that look like, and what does it look like when they come back? The other thing, and I know that there has to be discussions with teachers and everyone involved in the buildings, but whether or not things can be live streamed from the classrooms, particularly for the older grades. I just want to make sure that we're moving those conversations ahead and talking to teachers and everyone to see and unions to see if that's an option that people are comfortable with. And I hear us talking about trying to get the 70% or the 75% into the building and then find accommodations for the other 25 to 30%. I wonder if it doesn't make more sense, because out of that 75%, we're talking about how many aren't going to be able to be in the building because of threat of sickness or potential sickness or some symptoms or quarantining or that kind of thing. If it doesn't make a lot more sense for us to say, let's focus on making our virtual learning even better than it was and put 75% of our emphasis and effort there, and then provide for the smaller number of students that really do need to be in the building because of extra services or parent schedules and that kind of thing. Let's get a smaller group of students in the building that represent those who really need to be there, and still offer that as the option, but the in-building be the secondary or smaller option, and the virtual being the option where we put the most effort and energy, because I think that's where we'd get the most reward. So I just want to say that. I just want to throw that out there. I know I'm not necessarily in the mainstream on the committee, but that's where I'm leaning, and I hear a lot of parents talking about it, and I'm excited about us exploring the virtual option. And I wish we were exploring that as the first.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the input. Bill Day.
Yes, I have two quick questions. One kind of a follow-up on what Donna said. In respect to adults, in order for us to release a child, an adult has to enter all of our buildings. Has the state given us any guidelines on how that would develop? Because we're not releasing children to go out to a car and climb in a car and drive off with somebody. We have to check that out. And the second question is, I saw where we were prioritizing up to the 5th grade. Well, that's, I wonder what kind of impact that would have on us if we decided not to run buses for the high school kids or middle school kids, because our 5th graders are in the middle school. So how does that impact us?
Well, Bill, the question about the picking up kids, the guidance for from Ride and Rider right now is obviously limiting visitors to the building and trying to keep meetings virtual whenever possible if we're in full in person. If we are impartial or limited, there should be no visitors in the building. So they've asked us to really be mindful of deliveries, but when we think about parents, you'd be similar to those of you who maybe have gone to the doctors recently or had an appointment where that's why the emergency forms will be important, calling from your cell phone that's on the list of the emergency form, texting and calling the office stating you're here, going to the door, to the screen where the child could be walked out. So we're thinking through that as well. Right now, what they've said is that we should be limiting. We do have to, if the adult has to come in and it's full in person, we are asked to keep a contact log. So we have to get the name, address, telephone number of everyone who enters the building for contact tracing purposes. And then their second question was around the transportation. And I've actually had these conversations with other superintendents as well as legal. We are hearing that there should be or could be updated transportation guidance allowing more students on a bus if they're wearing masks, and we can consider the bus its own pod. Originally, what they've said was the transportation guidance was based on public transit, and if we can ensure that the same students ride the same bus every day, that they may be able to increase the amount of students on the bus. The other question that we've asked is if siblings can sit in the same seat. Some of the teachers asked, if Gina and Jane are in the same classroom, can they sit in the same seat because they're in the same pod and with a mask on? So the Department of Health said that they would get back to us on that as well.
Thank you. Craig Luzon.
Yes, I have a variety of questions. My first couple are on page 2, providing virtual learning for absences. So let's get to, and I'm going to bring that together with also page 3, Tuesday, Wednesday, A through J in person, K through Z virtual, and flipping it on Thursday, Friday. Logistically, how are the teachers going to do that? Don't answer that yet. My other questions are going to be related to cost. Congress right now is haggling it out on what they're going to do. I'm concerned of our substitute teacher pool in the past has always been very small. I got a feeling we better start recruiting people for the future. And second of all, my oldest daughter today, who's a part-time CNA, part-time EMT, et cetera, college student, she was enlightened with her place of employment that she has to do the tests because of her job once a week, I think. But the government, whether it's the feds or the state, is not going to pay for that anymore. And she said she had to put it on our health plan. That's going to impact. Are we going to force this on the teachers? Is that going to impact our health plan also? Is that something we should be checking on? I'm just concerned about cost, operation side, and then cost. Any information on that?
Not on that. So I'll start with the last question, Craig. What we're hearing is these questions, and I've jotted them down because what we do is we submit them to RIDE to get responses from the Department of Health. And we continue to be told that the Department of Health playbook, and they did release their child care one. They put that up on the Reopening Rhode Island website. So they told us that that would give us a lens. And based on how that plays out, they may be able to provide revisions and additional guidance for us. But they're capturing our questions as we ask them as well. And we are told that that guidance should come. As far as the health and the cost of the teachers or anyone being tested for COVID based on for employment purposes, we haven't heard that. Right now, that what they told us is there is not a plan to do massive testing for all districts, all teachers to return. But again, that's what we know right now. I'm thinking based on cases or data that could shift.
Well, my daughter is employed in an area where I understand why they need to get tested quite often. but we're also forcing a large group of people to start congregating together again. And I'm just curious if that's, I mean, I just remember a few years back when our health plan went up drastically. It's going to impact cost. And are there any other costs that we're not aware of yet?
So there's definitely, well, we have, I don't know if you're not aware of it, but I think we've all talked about the PPE, and, you know, we have, I mean, already there's over 30,000 masks on their way. We've received approximately almost 12,000 to date, reusables for employees. We're thinking through the disposables and the best ones for our younger students as well. That we've been given an algorithm to think through how many masks, how often, how much, so we can plan for the budget. And Ned has done a really nice job of capturing our costs as they relate to COVID, and things like our wipes, our cleaning, our paper towels, obviously the hand sanitizers, the electrostatic cleaners for those cleans at the end of those high need areas, to just name a few. But I don't know if there's anything that you wouldn't be aware of yet, but we will continue to bring those updates as we have them. Obviously the cost of staffing, the concerns around subs, what that could look like is one that we would, which is why we'll be putting out another survey to gauge our staff as well.
So my other question was, how will teachers address both groups of students at the same time?
So, and the teaching and learning team has done a lot of thinking about this. So, and they're working, and teachers are on that teaching and learning team. And there's more conversations because they're not only going to have to do it for partial, but they're going to have to do it if our kids are absent. So if, you know, Gina has the sniffles and she's not coming to school, I have to think about it automatically. So what we've been working on is this plan for 180 days of distance learning. And then face-to-face is going to be really the premium of how I then take that plan and adapt it when I have my my students face-to-face with me. As far as the date, when we go into partial and we use the alphabet to split them up by pod, the idea would be that we'd have all our teachers pre-K through 8 have Google Classrooms updated, and then for our younger students, pre-K, K1, that's more parent-centered, so they understand what the asks are. But all teachers will be expected to have the pre-K through 8, the Google Classroom, and then high school uses Canvas to be able to ensure that we're using those platforms and that we're ready to flip that switch, because theoretically, if a student's not feeling well, they're not coming to school. And I'm going to be honest with you, we're not doing this in absence of teachers. When you want to know how to get this done, you bring in the very people you're going to ask to do it and ask them to help you think through the planning so that it's something. And I think we've heard from many people today that our teachers really stepped up and our administrators to ensure that that plan was the best it could be. And now what they're doing is thinking through lessons learned and how can we make it better. The district is also investing in the District Learning Fellow, which is already part of the staff. It's not a new budget item. It was just revised to be able to think through what does distance learning need now? And like to Donna's point, what does it look like in the future? How do we capitalize on? How do we think through and reinvent what education could look like?
Thank you.
Thank you. Linda McAllister.
Actually, my question was just answered. Craig posed the question of teachers planning both face-to-face and distant learning for every day, and I was wondering how that would work, but thank you. It somewhat clarified.
We're still thinking it through, too.
I imagine you are. Thank you.
George Abbott.
Who would be responsible to do contact tracing if staff or students test positive?
So for the Department of Health, I will be the lead for all students, and Kristen Merritt will be the lead for all staff. We'll work directly with the Department of Health to do that.
Do you expect that would be time consuming?
I mean, I will work with the administrators, but as the leader of the district, it will be my responsibility to ensure that there's a thoughtful plan in place. But, you know, sort of that the buck stops here with ensuring that we're thoughtful about that tracing, and with the support of the administrators and the school nurses, we are ready to take that on.
You think it'd be practical to do that?
We've also looked at Power School. So Dorothy is creating a way for our admins to be able to track the pods within a Power School. So we do think that we'll be able to manage the number of pods and who's in what pod, so we could pull those reports.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Sylvia.
Hi, thank you, Gina, for everything that you're doing. I feel like you're doing a really good job. I want to preface kind of my thoughts with, firstly, I have a son that's going to be entering first grade. I am a physical therapist. I have my doctorate in physical therapy. I've worked in hospitals. Most recently, I have worked in a school system. So I feel like I have multiple concerns in regards to the health side, but also like the gross motor development that the early elementary school kids are going to be, how they're going to be affected. So I don't necessarily have questions that haven't been answered, but thoughts that have like entered my mind as far as the mask wearing, not requiring the elementary school kids to be wearing masks. Like, I understand maybe why inside the classroom the Department of Health is not really requiring it, as they're in the same pod. With COVID being more of a airborne sort of aerosol transmitted disease now that they're leaning towards, is acquired through, you know, your exposure over time. So basically wearing the mask isn't going to really be doing any good in the classroom, because they're going to be breathing in all of the same recycled air. So whether you're wearing the mask or not, that risk is inherently there. And if somebody in the classroom has it, it's going to get passed around the classroom. That being said, we know how like rampant flu goes around in the schools, especially in the elementary schools. And, you know, my son, I tell him all the time, cover your mouth when you sneeze, but does he do it? No. And every time he does it, you know, it's a reminder. So if they did have the mask on, it would at least reduce the amount of aerosols going around. But, you know, I don't know that like wearing the mask in the class or not is going to make a difference. I'm definitely one of the 25% who is not comfortable sending my child to school. And I'm also one of those parents, if there's not a virtual option, I cannot send him, feel comfortable. So we would be having to homeschool out of necessity because of the pandemic. And it makes me uncomfortable that we're paying taxes for public education because, and you know, that it just feels uncomfortable because in many of the plans, you know, we have if you're sick, you're going to have distance learning. Potentially pods are going to be quarantined. So it seems like for those families who are privileged enough to be able to keep the kids home, it really feels like we'd be missing out on an opportunity to be more inclusive. But also, you know, that virtual option would be helping to reduce the number of kids potentially in that classroom. It would be helping to reduce the number of kids that would be requiring busing. You know, in my opinion, like it really feels like it's got multiple positives to it to offer that option. And I understand that maybe it's state guided, but it really, I hope that you can, you know, push that to your superiors, Gina, and, you know, to the governor that, you know, this having that option for the families that are able to. I mean, right now I'm sacrificing my career to make, whether it's through Charahoe or whether I homeschool, I'm sacrificing my career, and we're lucky enough to be able to do it for my son. But, you know, it could be helping other families who aren't in the same position that I'm in, where they need the two incomes. and they need to be able to send their kids to school for their children or their child to get a really a better education than they could provide if they were required to stay home and you know, maybe work from home. Like, I understand that for families who are requiring on or relying on the two incomes, you know, the children were probably losing out on some learning opportunities. But it just really, really feels like we'd really be missing out. And the virtual option, you know, with all the other teachers that may not want to be, that are uncomfortable entering the schools themselves, you know, could the district looked at it like, you know, yes, I'm in Hopkinton, but, you know, maybe 10 people from Hopkinton don't want to send their child, and, you know, there's 20 people in Richmond. You could make a virtual class for the district for each grade, even, maybe. So you don't have to be necessarily a part of Hope Valley. Like, I'm just wondering if you've looked at it in that light, like, you maybe not necessarily have to be in the same town to be able to do it.
All great comments and all things that we've absolutely been discussing, and that's really why we're doing that second survey. One, to capture what staff are involved, because certification comes into play. So if we have a cohort of elementary school students, do we have certified teachers who we can assign to that virtual group? What does that look like? So we're really calling that our second tier of planning. But everything you just said, Jennifer, is the conversations we've been having over the last few weeks. And you're right. While Ride is saying, you know, more to come, more to follow, we'll give you, and as the governor is stated, if she believes that if we say, and if the Department of Health says we're ready for a full in-person learning, that would hopefully be enough. But what we're getting and hearing from our parents is, I don't know, I'm not comfortable yet. And can you still think about this option? So the answer is yes, we continue to think about that option. We don't know how feasible it is. We're gonna figure out how many parents are interested in that option, and what are the staff implications of that, and do we have staff interested in doing that, and do we have staff who otherwise would take a medical leave who could maybe be part of a virtual academy. So we've been running through different scenarios, and really what it will come down to is the feasibility. Do we have the teachers correctly certified? It gets much more complicated as you talk career tech. If it's just a different level. So there's multiple scenarios between our teachers, our administrators, our parents, community, and our students, you know, at telling us really what their thoughts are on this. Everything you've said was absolutely right on, and we continue to think through, and we do believe that we're all reinventing, you know, what our classrooms have looked like, what we believed education, while we're grieving the normal that we used to know. School opening 2020 is not going to look like school opening in the past. And we have to remember that. We have to allow our staff and our teachers to grieve that. We have to allow our students to grieve that. While it's not healthy to dwell on those things, it is important to understand that there's a loss. We felt it last year when our seniors and our 8th graders and our kindergarten celebrations didn't occur. We had loss, and our kids felt that. And I think, you know, our rising seniors this year are now worried about what does this pandemic look like for us? And there's a lot of anxiety and stress that come with that. So I think what I can tell you in my short time in Charahoe over this last month is there are lots of expertise. The teachers, this is not a summer vacation. They're not off, you know, hanging out, just relaxing. They're emailing me saying, can I be part of the subcommittee? And while I'm trying to be thoughtful and respectful of their time away, because they also need to decompress, so they're ready for all this work, they want to be a part of the planning. The support professionals want to be a part of this work. Our students, we led with our subcommittee and the student voice telling us, you know, what are your friends saying? And what are they most worried about? What do they want us to be thinking about? And there's no one answer. It's not going to be it's a this or a that. What we think is it's if we're, like I said, we're planning for that 180 days because we'd have to flip that switch at any moment. So if we have to flip that switch at any moment, how can we really be partnered with our teachers, with our parents, with our support professionals to think through what our community needs from us at this moment. And, you know, we talked today with the admins about, well, you know, what's our legacy to this work. We're all involved in history as it speaks. And the way we think through this is going to be what our children remember, what our parents remember, and how we're remembered. So this is important work.
So one more thing. Thank you. I think, you know, it's great to hear that, you know, you guys are really going to consider the virtual option seriously. As the recess aspect and the importance of like getting the kids outside of the school building, not in the recycled air. I know that, you know, I've been in a lot of contact with Mr. G about recess. I recently was, for my profession, I have to do continuing ed. So one of my continuing ed courses that I just recently took was the importance of recess. And, you know, I think that a lot of thought needs to be put into that. And it's not just recess for the elementary schools kids, but for middle school and even high school, like getting those kids outside too, because it makes me so uncomfortable to think of everyone in the closed spaces.
Everyone's thinking about not just every level, high school and middle school included, thinking about the outdoor classrooms and how we assign spaces to teachers so they can work outdoors. And what does that look like if we have students from home who are sick, and how we think through that planning as well. So outdoor classrooms, it will be a reality. We're thinking through, you know, all the needs. We are planning for a checklist for students and families of what they should be thinking about coming to school. Bring a towel so you can sit on, you know, possibly, I know in one of our elementary schools, they're purchasing some crates so kids can take them outside and sit on the crates. We're also talking through ensuring that we really are mindful about that public health that we talk about. It's everybody's responsibility to understand how to mitigate the germs. So while the Department of Health is telling us if they're 6 feet apart in the classroom and they can take their masks down, we also know that they're going to be this is going to be new to them. So we have to really manage that. So these mask breaks, being outside, and if it's 2 pods outside, being 14 feet. But I can tell you, all of the administrators are planning for both outdoor classrooms and breaks and movement opportunities.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Haxton.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much. I'm Kristen Svenningson Haxton from Richmond, and I have so many questions. I'm going to make them I'm trying to keep them to the questions that I think maybe might be a little productive here, but I have so many more, but I will keep them short. The first question is about the transportation. I believe I said I would need transportation for my kids because I work full-time and my husband works full-time, and I just have no idea what we're going to need. And so should I be registering for transportation, or is it better if I wait and not count myself in? Because I probably will try not to send my kids on the bus, but I just have no idea if I'm going to need the bus. So my initial reaction was I should register, that way I have a spot. That was my first question. My second question is about custodians. I apologize, I had to step away very briefly during the presentation, but is there any plan? I know at Richmond Elementary School, where my kids have attended, we have amazing custodians, but I've been at the school and I've seen issues with being able to clean up just regular problem situations that come up. So my concern is, with the frequency of sterilization and wiping everything down, I don't know how I can picture that for 400 kids in the school with the 2 custodians. My third question was just about, and again, I apologize, Gina, if you already said this, but about notifying families if someone is going into quarantine in a pod or classroom. And my fourth concern is just, I really have a concern that so few teachers responded that they were ready to go back to the classroom. So those are my 4 issues. And you guys, I can't even imagine, you're doing such a great job and we really appreciate it, but keep it up and we'll do whatever we can for you, but that's all for me.
So transportation, if you anticipate needing it, you should definitely make sure that you use the transportation form on the website to ensure that the students are there, because Lillian at the bus yard is working with me this week to plan the routes. So we want to make sure if you need the busing that you're included. For custodians, we are working with our custodial union to think through changes in shift. I have 2 custodial vacancies that I plan on moving, one at the middle school, one at the high school, that I'm planning to move to first shift for this year to increase the level of support there, as well as we're working through planning with our union to see who is available that first shift to move additional support for all elementary schools as well, and then think through that plan in the afternoon. So that has definitely been a conversation that we're having, because we know it's more frequent and they have cleaning schedules and they'll be working a little bit differently, but they'll be getting training on what that will look like. As far as notifying for quarantine, that's the Department of Health told us that those decisions will not be done on our own, that they will assign us somebody from the Department of Health to work hand in hand with us if that should happen, so that we'll work closely with them. I will take the lead as the district person for all students. And again, when I say that, it means it'll involve principals, but in the end, I really need to know what's happening to ensure that there's no missed pieces. And then with staff, that will be Kristen Merritt, our Director of Human Resources. And as far as so few teachers returning, that's a concern for us as well, and not just us. That's a statewide concern. So what we're thinking about is if we know we have staff that may prefer a virtual option, then we may be able to pull off a virtual learning academy. The question will be, what does that look like based on certification? Because it gets very tricky when we talk about career tech, as an example.
Thank you. So just as a little bit of housekeeping, I have 3 individuals who still have their hand up. I will be going through each one of them. And as a time check, it is 9:37 for this meeting. To extend past 10 p.m., the school committee will need to take a vote and extend it. So committee members at 10 till we'll take a look at where we're at and then make a decision on extension. With that being said, next up we have Nicole O'Malley.
Sorry. I'm the mom of 2 children with medical needs, and I really appreciate these conversations around virtual learning. That's the only way we or my children's medical team would be comfortable with any kind of learning in the fall. I do have concerns around distance learning, and I'm wondering, I know everyone had to make a really fast pivot and the teachers did the best they could. Many children still really struggled with distance learning. I'm glad to hear some did well, mine did not. And I'm wondering, how those kind of accommodations are being made and addressed and virtually. So for children who really require that virtual option. And then I'm also kind of looking at social emotional supports. I know you have the website. I appreciate that. Social emotional needs are so integrated in learning though. And it's not a simple, executive functioning. It's all integrated. And for my children, and again, and many I know, that really impacted their learning. And I think we had to kind of blow through it like it wasn't a thing because we didn't have the opportunity to think about it. But we now have the opportunity to think about it, and I would like to hear how it's being considered, if not now, at a future date.
So with the social emotional piece, we're thinking through the work around mindfulness and our work around stress, anxiety, how we build those into morning meetings if we're thinking elementary school, advisory activities as we think through middle school and high school, and 6 through 12 are required for the individual learning plan. And one of those requirements is to really think about those social emotional goals we have for students. So they would be thinking about what is the need that I have, and what would that goal be, and how do I plan for that goal as they get older and then become more self-regulated. When they're younger, it's thinking through how do I self-regulate? What does that even mean when I'm 5? And how do I talk through that with my teacher in an idea of like a morning meeting or a virtual conversation. Any family that has a medical need that cannot return to full in-person learning, that's determined based on the primary care doctor. So if the medical doctor that your children see has said that they cannot return to school and you have that documentation, that then we would then be required to provide distance learning to any child that falls into that category. So with that being said, if there's concern around your specific children and then their needs weren't met, I would advise you to reconvene the IEP team to talk through the importance of building in those scaffolds that will make them successful.
I appreciate that. I think I'm appreciative of our team. I think just the nature of virtual learning, I don't think it was anything our team did or didn't do, but I also, again, would have concerns over the equity, singling out children with additional needs. They're already feeling isolated and already feeling like there's already a social emotional stigma with my children and with many with similar needs. So that's just another thing I'd like to consider. Only those children like mine that have pre-existing medical conditions where we'd easily get a letter from their doctor, and you have one child missing in a classroom, it just kind of singles them out automatically versus having virtual options that are open to many.
All good points. I completely agree.
Thank you. Sheila Grover.
Hi, I just quickly want to thank everybody for everything they've been doing. It's unbelievable what is happening and how much you guys have made happen, especially considering there are so many holes in the information being provided to you by the state. And that is something that concerns me, and I wanted to say publicly in this forum, is that I feel that in your presentation, Gina, it was great, but I was disappointed in how many times you had to list that you're waiting for guidance. That handbook or whatever, that handy handbook, cannot come soon enough. And I also, way back to when David was speaking, David Stahl, I don't always agree with you, David Stahl, but I certainly agreed with everything you said in your last piece. So, because we really need to be pursuing a live stream option, if at all possible, because then doesn't that get you around the certification problem that you may run into with a learning academy of just the teachers that cannot be in a classroom for reasons of COVID? And it just seems to me that if the teachers are already kind of somewhat immobilized because they're not going to be moving through the room maybe as much as they would in a normal classroom situation, that it wouldn't be as difficult to set up some sort of live feed. And shouldn't all of you've already said that the classwork needs to go on Google Classroom or whatever age appropriate tool that's being used. So, I just feel like I'm gonna have a really hard time understanding why that's not an option if it ends up not being an option. I'm going to be honest about that. And I'm kind of hardcore about it because I have, a compromised, immunocompromised situation myself. And so it wouldn't help, it's not to do with my child. It's just something that I have to consider. And I won't take anybody else's time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Okay, Lola Fleischman.
Hi there. At the beginning, when you laid out these three, said that the school committee had to come up with the 3 plans, but that the RIDE and the governor would be the ones to decide. As you can obviously say at this meeting with the amount of participants, that we all have very strong opinions about which plan is chosen. And I will say as a background that I would have been the 75% that said yes. I'm now part of that 25% saying no. Instead, I've changed my mind in the last 2 weeks. My question is, by coming to this meeting, by filling out the new survey that you're asking us to do, are our voices being heard by the right people, by the Department of Education and by the governor? Are we doing enough to make it clear that we want a virtual option?
So what I can tell you is, I think I always think people should advocate in many venues, not just with your school committee, right? Because the more voices that are heard, especially at your legislative level, that have direct access to the governor. We have requested a meeting with the governor. We've met with her once. It was in June, and we've asked to meet with her again. We're hearing that possibly she'll meet with the superintendents on Thursday. But I do think that we need to be thinking about, and not just with the governor, but, a partnership with everyone. What does this look like? This is the resources that schools are going to need are different. And like I explained about the staffing, the certification needs, it's not easy. So when we're thinking about equity, if we can figure it out for elementary school, but we can't figure out for career and tech, then we provide an inequitable system. So we want to be thoughtful about what does that look like? How can we think differently? And then if we, is there a way to think thoughtfully to ensure that we have the proper certification necessary so that students are getting the educator in front of them? Because what we need for an AP, I can't put a kindergarten teacher in an AP history class. So we have to really be mindful about what that looks like. With that being said, I think about 20 years ago when, Facebook didn't exist and smartphones were just and things have changed. And we all saw how technology, and at a flip of a switch, the Charahoe School District was able to move to distance learning. And I think you probably heard every educator and administrator say, I don't know how we're going to do this. And they figured it out. And that's often what happens in times like this. So if anyone's going to figure it out, it's going to be our educators, our communities, your feedback, because we only get better when we get feedback. So yes, we hear your voices and we continue to think about them every time we get into our planning sessions, as well as our student voices. And please, those of you on the call, remind your children to go in and take that survey as well and ask their questions, because their questions are as important as our questions. And then sometimes it's from a different lens. But I hope that we are able to really think through an option where we can provide an education to all students and meet the needs for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Green.
Hi there. I would also like to echo Lola's previous statement. But first, with regard to the virtual learning option, I first wanted to thank all the school committee members and administrators for your dedication to public service. It's really appreciated, especially in these unprecedented times. We all know the science is clear. In normal circumstances, children are better off in school. But these are not normal circumstances. COVID-19, is sweeping across the United States. Although hospitalizations and ICU beds are better in Rhode Island, the rate of transmission is concerning at 1.14. Further, the research on kids and COVID-19 is new and very incomplete. Therefore, we need to ask, is in-person or even hybrid the safest option for everyone amid what are really the beginnings of a pandemic? As a healthcare administrator, I have seen the detrimental impact that this disease can have on individuals, families, communities, and healthcare delivery systems. That said, I have concerns on the details of the plan that Charlestown Elementary has submitted. My daughter will be entering into 2nd grade this year. Face coverings not being required in classrooms and only 3 to 6 feet of social distancing requirements. We do know all that that distance and masks do reduce the rate of transmission. So I'm really wondering who made the recommendation of no masks in the classroom and less than 6 feet of distance. Also, so many other questions that are unanswered. All said, with those questions, we personally would also like a virtual option to lean on, with or without a medical note, until we are assured that any return to school part-time or otherwise is safer for not only the kids, but the teachers.
So the recommendation around the mask came from the Department of Health. That was directly from them, and then the American Pediatrics Association, where they have told us, and we've asked the question time and time again, because I will not pretend to be a medical professional and tell you the perfect amount of distance. So I'm relying on that guidance to be accurate and inform us to make sure that we keep all our staff and students safe. We are asking that everyone have their mask on, and the guidance from RIDE is that if they're in their classroom pod in elementary school and they are seated 6 feet from each other, and I do believe, and I know the administrators, I think many of them are on the call, that they were able to get the 6 feet, and it's from the middle of the desk to the middle of the desk. That's how the measurement works, based on the research briefs provided from RIDE. Most, if not all, were able to get the 6 feet. And then in some cases, I think in middle school, it was 4, but the guidance from the American Pediatrics is saying 3 to 6. And if you pull up the RIDE FAQ, it's directly in there under that work. So you can find it directly in the RIDE FAQ. That's where we're getting it.
So you're saying that in the elementary school setting, it will be 6 feet?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And I'm going through the plans quickly, but I believe everyone was able to get 6 feet. There may be a couple of classrooms that are at 5, but the majority are at 6.
And the requirements for face coverings while in classroom, is this just for elementary school age children? They are not required to wear those?
They are required to wear them just once they're in their pod and seated 6 feet away. That's when they can take them down.
The distinction being is that just for elementary school children, that they can take them down?
It also can be for middle school if they're 6 feet apart. Same thing. I know that the middle school administration have worked very hard to keep students in their pods as well, similar to what elementary is doing it. So if they're able to keep the 6 feet and the teachers are coming to them, then that'll be a yes for them. It'll be a no for high school. Your high school students will be wearing masks the majority of their day because of the way a high school schedule operates and the crossover between classes and what those schedules look like. So our older students will be wearing face coverings the majority of the day, which is why we're planning for those outdoor times, hallways, and it's also will impact our emergency planning because we are being told for ventilation, we can prop open doors as long as they're locked, and we've trained teachers to close them in an emergency. But we're waiting to vet that through. We have that planning for emergency coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to rely on Mr. Day for his support and the police chiefs and our fire chiefs to ensure that we have thoughtful plans in place as we think through the pandemic.
And lastly, would it be helpful for us to be reaching to the governor to put some pressure on the virtual distance option without a medical note?
I do. I think that they're listening. I think this is the opportunity that everyone should advocate in any venue that they have to be able to make sure their voices are heard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One thing on this, Gina, are you able to save the chat log or save the file, download it?
I should be able to, yes.
Perfect. There's a substantial number of questions in there. I'm wondering if you could save the chat log and then have the team kind of just comb them out and maybe add an answer to them so that we can publish that for our next meeting as well, or in your weekly updates. With that being said, I do want to extend it. We are coming up on time and we do need a vote in order to extend it. Mr. Luzon.
Chair, since we're coming upon 10 o'clock, we have 7 minutes and we have 2 items left on business and we haven't even got to the consent, which should be fast anyhow. I still make a motion to waive the 10 p.m. policy for the school committee.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second to waive 10 p.m. policy according to school policy. Any discussion on that? No, great. Those in favor of waiving it? Aye. Thank you. Is anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. Policy is waived. We're going to keep on keeping on. With that being said, I have Catherine Giusti and Craig. I'm assuming that's why your hand was up. Okay, thank you. And then Robin Woodmansey, I saw your hand up as well. So Catherine first, and then Robin.
Thanks. Gina, I know we had these plans submitted. If RIDE comes out and says everybody's back full person 100% and we disagree with that, will we have the opportunity to make a different decision, or is RIDE, and I know the answer, but I'd like you to clarify, or is RIDE going to dictate the plans that every district uses? Thank you.
So we've been told that the determination of the phase comes from RIDO and the governor. And RIDE will support whatever the Department of Health and the governor are informing them based on the science, is what we're told.
Thank you. Robin said she's good to go. So thank you, everyone, for staying up late and engaging in this. As you can see, Superintendent Picard and the Chariho staff have been putting in a substantial amount of work, but we're not done yet. If there are additional questions, we will take them now. Otherwise, we will move forward with the next business item. Thank you, Lisa, for making a copy of that. All right, folks, I see no more hands. I'm going to close the discussion on this. Thank you, Gina and Jane, for the updates. Excellent discussion on this. This brings us to school reopening update G2.
So that is the Employee Assistance Program, and in your packet provides guidelines regarding establishing support and systems for a full in-person fall reopening with the health and well-being of our staff as one of our primary goals. I am recommending that the school committee vote to authorize a contract with All One Health for employee assistance services for the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust Pricing Agreement. It is on the master price list, so we don't have to go out to bid. And in the packet that you received, it reviewed some of the supports allowable for our staff and educators that come free. And it's also free for their family members, not just them. It will cover things for emotional or stress-related problems, marital or family problems, financial and legal difficulties, drug or alcohol abuse, problems related to work, balancing work-life situations, as well as coaching, medical advocacy, work-life info and referral, and personal assistance. And again, that's not just for the staff, but also for their families.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. So a motion by Craig, seconded by David Stahl. This is open for discussion. Linda Lyle.
Thanks, Chair. I was on the committee that discussed looking at this option. I would wholeheartedly would support it. In my current life, I did have the opportunity to have experience using an EAP program, and it is very, very, very useful because, like Gina was saying, it gives staff opportunity and their families opportunity to access a myriad of support. So I'm assuming that it was, I mean, I'm all about efficiencies too, so it is something that we can afford at this point. If we can, and we do have the money in the budget, I would definitely support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Donna Chambers.
Yeah, Ned, is this $7,728 an annual fee, a monthly fee, forever?
That's an annual, estimated annual fee.
Okay.
Number of employees we have.
Okay.
And whether to continue on will depend on, how we approach this next year. As far as money in the budget, this was part of the prior year's funds that we set aside, the commitment we made earlier in the meeting.
Right. Thank you, Ned. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thanks, Don. Bill Day.
Is there any possibility we might be able to tap into some federal money to offset this cost?
It's in what money? I'm sorry.
Well, the government's
Federal.
giving money for everything from diapers to bridges to nowhere and stuff like that. So is there any possibility we can recoup this from the government?
We are putting it on, all of these are going listed on our budget expenditures that we're hoping to be reimbursed for. We don't know what the CARES Act will allow, but we do believe that this will be allowable expense.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other discussions on this? If not, do I see any hands coming up? Jennifer, Sylvia, I see your hand pop up.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
as far as like the PPE, maybe you could at least for the teachers have them get N95 masks. If the kids aren't going to be wearing masks, it just, you know, because those masks are the ones that are really going to protect them. A cloth mask is not going to really protect you, especially if you're in the class for such a long period of time. And I know that the N95 masks are costly, but it just seems that we should really be trying to protect the safety of the teachers as well.
I do know that there was an order put in for the nurses to have the those. I know somebody else asked about face shields. Face shields are not. We're not allowed to use face shields unless you also have the mask. As far as ensuring one for every staff, I know we could look into it. I don't believe that was something that we had done for every staff. No.
I mean, just from the healthcare perspective, an N95 mask is the only thing that's really going to protect the staff members. It's the disease is contracted, you know, it's exposure over time. So if you're in the building or in that same group for 6 to 7 hours a day for up to 42 hours a week, or no, 35 hours a week, a cloth mask is going to do nothing for them. The face shield doesn't filter out the air. You know, people that are working in hospitals going into the COVID rooms, they have an N95 mask. They're wearing up to two gowns, gloves, booties. It's no joke. I feel like the leadership of the country is really downplaying this disease, and I know that the healthcare workers need the N95 mask, but if we're going to be putting our teachers in this environment with the kids, I really feel like their health needs to be valued.
Thank you for that comment, Jennifer. I just want to make a point of order on this. The motion and second on the floor is for the employee assistance program. It is not related to specific PPE in this case. I totally understand your point that you're making in this, and it's something that we can circle back to in terms of a request for future agenda items. But with respect to the motion and the second, I do want to complete the discussion and vote through on the employee assistance program related to the health and well-being. To that end, Craig, who's on?
You answered it, sir.
Thank you. Any further discussion on approval of the funds necessary to support the employee assistance program? Okay, I see no further discussion. I am closing discussion. We have a motion and a second for the approval of the funds in support of the employee assistance program. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? Abstaining? Recusals? Okay. I'm counting that as unanimous then. Thank you. This brings us to letter H.
So this was placed by the request of Clay Johnson for the efficiency study discussion.
Clay, the floor is yours, sir.
Great. So I know there was interest from the towns in an efficiency study, essentially their efforts to have us look closely at the budget and make sure that we stay within their parameters. The sense from the committee that I got at the time anyway was that we're very interested in finding efficiencies, but not necessarily interested in paying a lot of money to another company to find efficiencies, knowing that those efficiencies might not reflect what we want to spend the money on or our values in the district. So the committee also had the thought that an efficiency study would be guided well by asking good questions. So it seems to me that we have a lot of good folks here that want to spend the taxpayers' money properly and efficiently, and we can ask some good questions. So I thought to myself, what kind of questions would I ask? And I came up with a couple, and I'm happy to lead off with these and maybe have that as the beginning of a discussion. But we have a new finance guy on board, and there's 3 areas that I was thinking about. And the first one relates to us budgeting differently this year. We're going to be budgeting at the building level with building professionals at that level overseeing expenditures that will then bubble up to a full budget. And one of the headline items would be some kind of norms that we would create in the private sector. In the property management business, you can buy benchmarks, and those benchmarks would be broken down by line item so that you would have a sense of what is a normal expenditure in this area. And I think that could be done at a cost much lower than the 100,000+ that we were talking about for an efficiency study. So that's one area I think we should look at. I think it's also important to look at the burden on the taxpayer. We're all concerned about that. We all talk about it, but we never measure it. And so one way to measure that is what is the tax burden as a ratio of home values? And I think that data is very easy to get. But also, what is the tax burden as a percentage of income? And I'll admit that's harder to get, but I think we can do it. And so that would not only be the average income, which is what we always talk about. We always talk about average income for the district is $120,000 per household, and they're fine and they can pay the taxes. And I would tend to agree with that. But I think we also need to look 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations out and see, is that affordable? And that's something that I think we need to take a look at. And the third area, I called it equity. But what I'm seeing is an imbalance between revenues and where students are coming from. So I would like to see a breakdown of students by town for the 3 towns of Hopkinton, but also for the sending towns from other areas that are using our CTC. And then what is the dollar revenue that we're getting per town? And that would give us a bunch of different ways to slice that information in terms of cost per pupil per town and those kind of things. So those were the ideas I was thinking of. I think most of it's doable in-house, and we could probably get other expertise if we needed it. Like I said, benchmark studies are fairly inexpensive to purchase.
Thank you, Clay. This is open for full discussion. I have Linda Lyle and then George Abbott.
Thanks, Chair. Hey, Clay, I really like this idea. To that end, I was thinking about this just today, and maybe this would be something Gina might address. I'm fairly new on the committee. I've only been like about 1.5 years, but I was wondering if it would be worth our while as a committee or you as a new superintendent to look at the committees, the subcommittees that we have, and how useful some of them are right now, and how maybe some of them need to be updated. And I know, Clay, you and I are on the budget committee, so maybe that would be more of a budget efficiency committee, or maybe that could be, we would look at it a little bit differently, and maybe, have actually meetings that would, maybe talk about some of your ideas. I think I like a lot of your ideas. I think it might be very interesting to explore them. So that was just a thought I had, was to look at the subcommittees that are in place right now that we're all on at some, and maybe they just need to be updated a little. I mean, maybe it's time. I don't know when was last time they updated those subcommittees, but, like even to, Bill Day and his, emergency and health and safety committees, maybe those need to be a little updated too, to make them a little bit more robust and a little more active. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. George.
Yes, following up on Clay, property taxes to fund education is a very regressive form of taxation. It doesn't take into account the household's income. You could be a millionaire and you'd pay the same amount of money as someone making minimum wage. So I think that has to be addressed at some point, probably at a more macro level, but it's really not fair the way we tax now. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, George. David Stahl.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm on board with what Clay is proposing. I think doing some of this in-house is a great way get at some of those numbers and some of that information and get the conversation started without a big expense. And I'm all about benchmarks and comparison to know how do we compare with other places? How do we compare with other states, other districts? Where are we ahead? Where are we behind? What do we need to look at and adjust? We don't know those things unless we ask the questions and unless we look into it. So I think they're really great questions. I think if Clay has a motion to assign this to somebody or put it forward, he should make that motion, and I would certainly support it.
Thanks, David. Bill Day.
Yeah, I agree with everyone supportive of what Clay said. But as someone who's dealt with this for a number of years, again, I think that in order to achieve some credibility, would there be a possible ability of having a representative from each town to work with the in-house people, so that there would not be the stigma of well, you know, figures don't lie, but liars figure type of mentality? Because you know, I know where that's coming from. Been coming from one individual for a number of years, and I think we need to take, and if we're going to spend the time, if they're going to spend the time and effort to come up with this, I think we need to assure them that there's no cooking of the book, so to speak. So that would be my suggestion. Also, if we could get a representative from each town, possibly, to be part of this.
Thanks, Bill. Lisa McPherson.
I just want to add that I also think that, Clay, this is exactly the right time to do this. I think that it was really prudent of you to hold on to it and to circle back as we chose our new administrator, our new lead for the district. We have our new finance people. So I don't know if this is, you know, if your initial thought was to kind of just take everyone's temperature and get some feedback, but if that's what you're looking to do, I just wanted to be clear that I also support this at this time. And so to David's point, you know, I'm someone that also likes to kind of formalize things, as you know. So if there is a motion or if there is an action item or something that you have that you're ready to launch, know that you have my support as well.
Thanks, Lisa. So, David, I see your hand back up.
Yeah, to Bill's point, which was a good one about involving the towns. Part of this is Clay's bringing this because we have some obligation, you know, to our town councils and representatives that are asking us to explore and look at the numbers and the budget things. So if you know, we're being asked to do that, certainly we should be including them in the process. And I know Hopkinton has a town manager that could be included in the process. And I'm not as familiar with the other towns' positions and titles and governments, but you know, Hopkinton's town manager, Bill, would be a great person to have included in that. And that would, again, as Bill said, bring the credibility, bring some unity into it, because that's been a source of some dissension and some strife. So let's get all those people in and have the conversation together, bring them into again, task force, subcommittee, whatever kind of group you want to make it. I hope Clay has some good wording in mind, but get those people in together and tackle this. I think it's important.
Thanks, Dave. So I think there's broad support for this. Clay, I see your hand up.
Honestly, I'm not sure how I would formulate a motion. I'm not sure we've thought this through enough to know what we're asking for, other than we want to be thoughtful, we want to be responsive to the town councils, and we want metrics that mean something that our building administrators can actually use. And I'm not familiar enough with the public education benchmark system to know what those specific answers are. I'm happy to help, and I can certainly send my thoughts over to Gina and to Ned, but I'm not sure that's the final answer.
Yeah, I think that to start this off, maybe we do initiate just some questions in terms to Ned and Gina, in terms of what type of benchmarks would be of interest, how they would be acquired and calculated, and whether or not it's feasible. and we continue the dialogue at the next meeting when they've had a chance to look at how those calculations would be made, what additional information, what challenges they would have in it. And then out of that, if we get to a point where we feel it's mature enough to codify it into an actionable task, maybe we take it up then. I think that, everything I've heard, I think that you've got broad support for this topic. So I don't know anybody on the committee who's just kind of shaking their head yet. So I'm seeing a lot of support. So if the committee's okay with that approach, my recommendation would be that we add this to our next meeting as well, and we touch on it, and we give Ned a chance to kind of mull over some of the questions that are provided. And I encourage the committee members to specifically send comments and inquiries to Ned and Gina, and so that we can kind of build that pool of information, and then from there we start to look at how we want to formalize a task force with the towns. I totally agree. It's got to be pulled in. They'll be able to respond to that as well. So if that's okay with the committee, then that would be my recommendation. Clay, if you're okay with that, okay, then let's do that, folks. Please send your comments, questions, inquiries to Gina and Ned. Let's start to pool what that looks like, and then we can, have the experts kind of point us in the right direction so that we can assign the right action at the next meeting. Perfect. Okay, so any further discussion on that, team? Otherwise, I'm going to close discussion. Discussion's closed. Thank you all. That concludes the business section. Only 4 more sections to go. For the 60 people who've remained, thank you. But the next ones go quick. All right, so we are on to consent agenda items. I do believe that we need A1 and A2 pulled, right? Because I know we had an absence from last one. So I'm seeing a head nod. Everybody's good with that? All right, so A1 and A2 are pulled. Who needs something else pulled? I see nothing else. Mr. Luzon.
So, Chair, at this time, I make a motion to move the remainder.
Second.
Seconded. Thank you. So motion to remove the remainder by Craig, seconded by, I saw Linda's hand come up. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstaining or recusing? No, then the consent agenda items other than A1 and A2 have been approved unanimously. This brings us to A1. Mr. Luzon.
Chair, at this time, I make a motion to approve A1 executive session minutes of July 9th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Craig, seconded by Linda Lyle for the executive session minutes of July 9th, 2020. Any discussion on this? No. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. Bill Day and David Stahl. Any others? Okay. Any opposition or recusals? I think we captured. Right. Speak up if there is. Okay. I don't see any. Good. So we just have the two abstentions. Yes, sir.
At this time, I make a motion to approve A2 regular session minutes of July 9th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Craig, seconded by Linda Lyle. Any discussion on this? No. Closing discussion. Move to the vote. Those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? I see none. Abstaining? I see David Stahl. Thank you. Bill, did you need to that one as well? Wait.
No, I only missed the executive session. I got in for the other one.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Okay, so it was, everyone was in favor except for one abstention, and that was Mr. Stahl. Perfect. That closes out the consent agenda items. This brings us to reports.
Oh.
That's Gina.
So subcommittee reports are none at this time. And for the superintendent's report, the summer advance, we are in starting day 3 tomorrow. As you can imagine, the majority of our summer advance has been the conversation around reopening, as well as tomorrow we have John Anderson joining us to provide the administrators with Title IX training, along with open meetings, train the trainer training, so they can train their school improvement teams. So that'll happen tomorrow. And then we will be having our business meeting on Thursday with all the central office administrators, along with our principals. Again, really think through all of the additional planning that's going into sort of our phase 2 planning around reopening, and that more detail based around virtual learning options, the staff efficiencies, and then preparing for the surveys and finalizing FAQs so we can make sure they're ready for our families and staff for August 1st. The other thing is the coming events. The upcoming events really will be focused around the virtual forums that we will be holding by school. We anticipate those happening the first and second week of August, because the plan will be as final as it can be, July 31st, with the idea that we'll continue to get our feedback and then iterate as necessary. We'll hold them by school. I'm sure many of you have seen districts are holding them as a larger community. However, we did feel that, one, myself being new, it was important for me to have the touch point to meet individual communities, as well as have the opportunity to talk through reopening as it relates to their individual schools. And then those will be recorded on Zoom as well. So parents that can't make them will have access to the recording, or if they have multiple children, they'll have the ability to attend one, or if they want to join the Zoom, they can, as well as use the FAQ as a support.
Thank you. Okay. This brings us to school committee requests for future agenda items or legal opinions. Mr. Luzon.
Yes, Chair. Actually, kind of several. A, do we anticipate any revenue losses this coming year due to the CTC? I'm just curious. The pandemic, you know, however we operate, kids from Westerly, Narragansett, et cetera, are they going to be signing up to come here? 2, in relationship to my question earlier, are we going, any increased costs that we're not seeing? If we could just, anything relationship to that, and any possible revenue kind of dealt with earlier from the state of the feds. Just all about money. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Clay.
Are we going to have a placeholder for the anti-racist task force and the school reopening? So if there are any updates in August, we can touch base on them.
Yes, I think we should. I think we need to, one, keep track of it to make sure that it is moving forward, and folks who are able to join the anti-racism task force, as well as the school reopening, I think has got to be continuous as well. So thank you. I believe we should hold placeholders for those, at least in terms of a question and answer session. All right. I will tell the committee now that Donna Siskevich has reached out to me and said that August is looking incredibly full as well. So keep in mind we may have to bump some things around, but not these ones. Okay, I have Bill Day.
I got a couple of quick things here. One, I'd like some feedback on the situation that I mentioned there with the letter from Mr. and Mrs. Harris on this.
Thank you.
The letter to the administrative team. And two, I'd like to the threat assessment team. I've been going over the plans, and I think we need to have a little quick discussion, and we can do that in executive session actually on threat assessment teams, because it's not open to necessarily open to public for a state law because of the school safety issues.
Yeah, thank you. With respect to your first ask, I want to be sensitive to that. I in terms of, I think we need to understand why. I just don't know if it's a public session discussion.
I don't care how we do it. Personally.
I know. I'm just letting you and the community know that might, since it might, yeah. So that might happen in executive session, but understood. And then in terms of the other ask, that obviously has to happen in executive session. Okay. George Abbott.
Yes, I'd like to have a racial background printout for staff and student body.
Okay.
Sort of give us a metric, as to the racial.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I understand the request. So basically, you're looking for a breakdown of the student population as
Right.
well as the staff population
Right.
with respect to.
It's probably already available for the student population, but I'm not sure it's available.
It's actually published.
Right.
Yeah, it's published annually for the students.
For the students.
I think all of you get a copy of that booklet.
Right. I'd be interested in knowing the breakout for the staff as well.
Okay. Other requests? Okay. I do want to keep an item in here we talked about earlier, which is basically how to manage a virtual and a face-to-face school committee meeting to give everybody options in that space. And then, okay. I see nothing else, so I will close that section. And that brings us to adjournment.
Ready, sir? Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Craig, seconded by, was that George?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Counting that as unanimous.
Stay safe, everybody.
Chair?
You can-
Chair, don't
Yes,
end the